The Caribbean faces specific structural challenges: high energy costs, fragmented markets, high logistics and transport costs, limited economies of scale, regulatory divergence among the region, vulnerability to climate shocks, and exposure to organized crime and instability. At the same time, opportunities exist: renewable energy potential, strategic geopolitical positioning, maritime and air connectivity, services, digital and creative industries, logistics and nearshoring potential. Investment attraction must also be matched by workforce readiness, skills development, particularly in digital technologies, technical trades and advanced services, will be essential to ensure the Caribbean captures value from emerging sectors. But to convert opportunity to investment, predictability and scale are essential. And there is much regional harmonization becomes quite critical. If global fragmentation is the risk, regional integration is the response. Let me speak candidly. Investors see 15 small markets, but they are looking for scale, predictability, and harmonized rules. Without deeper regional regulatory alignment, the Caribbean will struggle to attract transformational investment. There are three areas where harmonization could have immediate impact. The first is trade facilitation and customs procedures. Digitized and interoperable customs systems, regional single windows, standardized sanitary and phytosanitary regulations, and common port community systems. Digital tools must underpin this process, include interoperable payment systems, digital identity frameworks, e-signatures, and unified online licensing platforms, underpinned by cybersecurity mechanisms. This will reduce business cost while enabling regional scale. This will reduce administrative friction and could cut trade costs by double digits. Investment codes to be harmonized. Imagine if the Caribbean adopted a common regional investment framework, predictable dispute settlement mechanisms, transparent procurement rules, standardized incentives linked to sustainability. This would reduce investor uncertainty and prevent harmful competition between neighboring states. The third element is the maritime, air transport, and energy policy coordination. Transport fragmentation drives cost. Coordinated maritime cabotage policies should be looked at. Aligned aviation regimes, regional renewable energy coordination, standardized power purchase agreements. Energy costs remain among the highest constraints on Caribbean competitiveness. A coordinated regional renewable energy transition would lower production costs, attract green manufacturing, and support compliance with evolving EU climate regulations. Regional harmonization is therefore not bureaucracy, it is competitiveness. The third pillar is about the EPA from performance to platform. The EPA was visionary when signed, but its full potential remains underutilized. Too often it is viewed as a trade preference agreement. It is much more. The EPA already provides 100% duty-free and quota-free access to the EU market, one of the most valuable legal advantages any small nation possesses today. Its scope extends far beyond tariffs, covering services and investment, digital trade and e-commerce, competition policy, intellectual property, public procurement, data governance, and regulatory cooperation. Importantly, the agreement contains a regional preference clause, reinforcing Caribbean integration by ensuring commitments benefit all CARIFORUM states. It also establishes a predictable investment framework grounded in sustainability, ensuring that environmental or social standards are not lowered to attract investment. In today's volatile world, legally binding, rules-based access to the EU market is an asset of immense value. The EPA is not simply a trade agreement, it's a rules-based operating system for Caribbean economic integration. But implementation must deepen stronger private sector awareness, upgrade standards compliance, build regional value chains, proactive use of EPA institutions, and secure and structured dialogue on non-tariff barriers. The fourth pillar is the global gateway, which I call a 360 strategic approach. Trade agreements alone do not build ports, grids, fiber networks, or digital ecosystems. This is where the global gateway comes in. Global gateway represents a structured shift in EU external engagement, moving from traditional aid towards investment mobilization, blended finance, guarantees, and private sector partnerships. Partnerships with the Caribbean Development Bank and regional private equity funds will deepen the CARIFORUM fledgling financial ecosystem. Through guarantees, blended finance instruments, and risk-sharing mechanisms, the Global Gateway reduces barriers that historically prevent Caribbean projects from reaching financial closure. The objective is not simply funding projects, but making Caribbean investment pipeline bankable and attractive to global capital. Team Europe brings together the EU institutions, the European Investment Bank, member states' development banks, and of course, private capital. Across transformative sectors, such as the digital connectivity, renewable energy, transport and logistics, sustainable value chains, health resilience, education, and research. Perhaps a greater institutional role for Caribbean economic actors would deliver the development promise of the EU Global Gateway Initiative. We need some concrete opportunities, which could include the blue economy financing and marine innovation, green hydrogen and renewable energy transition, regional pharmaceutical and manufacturing, and healthy sovereignty, digital connectivity, infrastructure, and interoperable payments, skills development and technical education partnerships, turning environmental challenges such as sargassum into new commercial value chains. The Global Gateway is not about building projects, it's about building systems. So I think if we think about a partner of choice, in a competitive geopolitical environment, the Caribbean has options, but not all partnerships are equal. The EU model is distinctive because it is transparent, rules-based, sustainability-driven, anchored in standards, respectful of sovereignty, and long-term. Under the Caribbean Regional Protocol, new priorities emphasize inclusive entrepreneurship, MSME participation, women and youth empowerment, and sector-focused transformation, ensuring integration delivers tangible benefits for Caribbean citizens. The EPA provides legal certainty. The Global Gateway provides financial risk sharing. Together, they form a powerful de-risking framework capable of unlocking transformational investment. What parliamentarians can do? One, I believe you should help to accelerate regional regulatory harmonization, deepen the EPA institutional use, anchor the Global Gateway investment in structural reform, support creation of regional Global Gateway project pipelines, identifying a small number of high-impact, bankable initiatives capable of mobilizing large-scale private investment. In closing, Caribbean stands at a crossroads. It can remain vulnerable or extend to external shocks, or it can leverage its geography, talent, and partnership to become a resilient economic actor. The EPA provides legal certainty, the Global Gateway provides investment muscle, and regional harmonization provides scale. Together they form a strategic triangle for Caribbean transformation. The future of the Caribbean EU partnership will not be measured in aid disbursed, but in competitiveness built, investment mobilized, and resilience secured. Let this assembly mark the moment when we move decisively from preferential access to competitive advantage, from fragmented regulation to regional scale, and from traditional aid to strategic investment partnership. I thank you very much.
Thank you so much, Ms. Francis, for this very interesting picture of the situation. We are now going to continue with the second part, but I hope that you, Ms. Francis, will remain with us and are also will take. And now it's silence. That's a good thing. But I was asking you if you also want to remain in this session, that we have an interaction with the parliamentarians, and then they can also raise questions to you. That would be very welcome, if it's possible for you. We don't hear you at this moment. We don't hear you.
Me?
Yes, now.
Okay, yes, I will stay for a little while. About how long do you think?
Well, it's depending on the panelists, but we're already asking also to be brief also in the panelists, and that we have an exchange with the parliamentaries. So I think, well, what we have 90 minutes, I think, in the end, 1:45. Huh? Dus well, 1 hour, 1:30, if that's possible, then it would be nice. And otherwise, we will see. All right, let's start with the panel. Let's start with Mr. Demi Sinanan. He's the Executive Director of the Caribbean Export, the EU-funded entity responsible for trade and investments promotion in the region. He has over more 20 years of experience in the private sector development, trade and export promotion, investment attraction and building economical resilience in the Caribbean. And delighted that you are here, so I want to give you the floor to address us. The microphone, please, for the speaker.
Hello, good afternoon. Yes, there we go. So good afternoon, everyone. Thank you very much to the organizers for inviting Caribbean Export Development Agency to be part of this, no doubt, distinguished panel. It is certainly a pleasure for me to be here in Antigua and Barbuda, one of the nicer countries here in the Caribbean. So I was very interested listening to Ms. Francis's contribution because it mirrors exactly what I have to say. But I mean, there's no problem in hearing the same thing twice because it reinforces the message. So Caribbean Export Development Agency, we are the regional private sector development agency. We are responsible for trade and investment promotion and SME development across the CARIFORUM region, which are the 14 CARICOM member states plus the Dominican Republic, a population size of over 25 million, not including tourist arrivals. We represent what a partnership with the European Union can look like, because the European Union has been a strong partner of the agency for over 30 years. In fact, this year is the 30th anniversary of Caribbean Export Development Agency. Right now, we are engaged in a program under the Global Gateway worth 12 million euros that will be used to really strengthen the private sector in the Caribbean region to build resilience and increase trade and investment, particularly with the European Union under the EPA, which Ms. Francis very clearly articulated. What are the advantages of being with the EPA? I will just reinforce that the EPA has been around for many years. I believe it was signed in 2008. We're in 2026, so we're approaching the 20th anniversary. And while there have been significant strides in trade and investment under the Economic Partnership Agreement, there is still gaps and there is still unrealized potential for trade and investment under the EPA between the Caribbean region and the European Union. There's a number of reasons for this. One, and I would say one of the more important ones, is really scale. The Caribbean region, small, we have small and medium, most of the businesses are small and medium-sized enterprises, and they do not have the required scale to successfully penetrate the European Union market. So what we're seeing is that the volume of trade that we would expect on the EPA is unrealized. So the first question is, what can we do to enhance scale in the Caribbean region when we're dealing with over 80 to 90% of businesses being small and micro, medium-sized enterprises? And the answer to that is, of course, partnerships. We have to go beyond national businesses trading with Europe. We have to look at a regional approach towards increasing trade with the European market. And that would require cross-boundary partnerships between businesses in the Caribbean region. And Ms. Francis, as she noted, we need to have harmonization across policies and procedures across the Caribbean region to allow for that cross-boundary partnerships. Can a business in Antigua and Barbuda partner with a business in Trinidad and Tobago to ship products and services to the European Union in a very efficient way? That is strategies that we have to encourage. We also have to look at transportation and logistics. Transportation and logistics are some of the the costs of transportation and logistics in the Caribbean region are some of the amongst the highest in the world. Many of us know that in order to get across the region, it takes a lot of time and it takes a lot of money. If I were to travel from Barbados to Antigua and Barbuda, it would probably cost me as much as it would cost to travel from Barbados to Miami or Barbados to New York City. My colleague Jonas was asking me, what about a ferry service? Unfortunately, we do not have a regional ferry service, which severely restricts the ability to move goods and people across islands to make it competitive. Cost, and again, it boils down to cost, it boils down to taxes, it boils down to the volume of moving people and the scale of moving people and goods across boundaries. We have to look at standards as well. Even though we have the EPA, which allows for which allows for 0% tariffs on trade, there are a lot of non-tariff barriers that exist. And Caribbean firms, unfortunately, do not have the capacity or the capital to access the market due to these non-tariff barriers. How can we support Caribbean firms to meet the standards for packaging, labeling, phytosanitary requirements so that they can adequately trade with their European colleagues? From the investment point of view as well, there's a lot of potential for investment from Europe into the Caribbean and Caribbean into Europe. Investment in technology, whether we're talking about green technologies, whether we're talking about digital technologies. But we have to be able to attract the investors. And one of the issues that Caribbean Export Development Agency has found is that unfortunately in the Caribbean region, we have a lot of concepts, we have a lot of ideas, but what we do not have are bankable projects that we can present to investors. And this is not just on the private sector side, this is also on the public sector side. Outside of energy sector projects, or in some cases tourism projects, we find it very difficult to find bankable projects that we can present to investors. Is there a way that we can invest in a project packaging facility that will allow packaging of investment projects that we can present to European investors in a particular platform? That's something that Caribbean Export Development Agency has been working on very, very hard. And every year we host our Caribbean Investment Forum, which has now become, with support from the European Union through Global Gateway, this has become the flagship platform for promoting investments from the Caribbean region to global investors. Last year, we held the Caribbean Investment Forum in Jamaica. This year, Caribbean Investment Forum 2026 will take place in Barbados, Bridgetown. And I invite everyone to attend. When we have additional details, I will share it with everyone. That's my little plug that I got in for this. So these are some of the challenges that we face in terms of increasing trade and investment between the Caribbean region and Europe. But there are also a lot of opportunities. Ms. Francis mentioned cultural exchanges, services, nearshoring. But we also have to look at niche products, because the Caribbean region can fill, with our scale and with our competitive advantages, we can fill niche markets in the European markets and across the globe. So we are currently exploring what are those niche products and those niche high-value markets that we can get into with our cocoa, with our turmeric, with our vetiver, and all of these products that are indigenous to the Caribbean region. And I also would like to mention, in terms of technology, we have to encourage partnerships between the Caribbean region and Europe. Caribbean Export, with the support of the European Union, are part of a consortium where we execute a program called the EU-LAC Digital Accelerator Program. And that program is focused on building partnerships between European firms, Caribbean startups, and startups in Latin America. And this will allow for the exchange of technologies and the exchange of, and the building of partnerships across 3 regions. How can we again look at building these types of relationships? Because it's going to build the scale necessary required to increase trade and investment between the Caribbean region, Europe, and other regions outside of the world. So I will stop there. I think I'm on my 5 minutes, so I will stop there and say thank you, and I'll be happy to answer any questions that you may have. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinanan. Then we go on remote with Mr. John Basil. He is Policy Advisor responsible for the European Union CARIFORM file in DG Trade. Are you there, Mr. Basil?
Hello, good afternoon. Can you hear me?
Good afternoon. We see you and we hear you. The floor is yours.
Thank you. Thank you, honourable members, ladies and gentlemen, and fellow panelists. Apologies that Mr. Paolo Garzotti was not able to make it. He's stuck in a train at the moment. I thought just perhaps to recall where the EPA came from. For those who weren't here in the 70s, when originally the EU gave preference to ACP countries, to unilateral preference to its market, but the other developing countries complained, and the WTO found this arrangement was not consistent with its principles, hence the negotiation of the EPAs under the Cotonou Convention. And so under the EPAs, we have a reciprocal agreement, so both sides are opening their markets, but it's what we say asymmetric. So the EU has opened its market 100%, while CARIFORM has excluded some products from market opening and has also had much longer periods with which to reduce its tariffs. And of course, the agreement was framed as a trade and development agreement, with capacity building seen as an important component. But as Ms. Francis pointed out, this fact that we continue to offer tariff-free and quota-free access to our market is an important element that shouldn't be forgotten. And the EPA was signed, as was mentioned, 2008. So in just under 3 years, we'll celebrate its 20th anniversary. And maybe a quick assessment, with a caveat that our responsibility for the file has been changed within DG Trade. So we're looking at this with fresh eyes. I think on the economic side, our trade is worth about 20 billion. That's about a similar level to that with Central America. And the EU is CARIFORUM's second largest trade partner, well ahead of China, but also significantly behind the US, about half the volume of trade with the US. And EU exports grew by about 8% to CARIFORUM in 2024, while imports increased by a massive 35%. This is largely due to the rapidly increasing imports of offshore oil from Guyana. In fact, the bilateral trade with Guyana accounts for about half of the overall EU CARIFORUM trade. And the EU has a 9.3 billion euro deficit with that country. The Dominican Republic, also an important player, with about a fifth of the trade and increasingly diversifying its products, followed by Jamaica and then a long tail of the other Caribbean economies. Looking at the agreement from a formal perspective, the fact that it's still in provisional application and has not yet been ratified by 4 CARIFORUM countries and 1 EU member state does not send a good signal. So we hope that this assembly can contribute to political efforts to complete this process. In this context, a new member state, or it was new, Croatia, has requested accession to the agreement, but we still don't have agreement on the services offer that it made, so that's also a pending matter. And we're also disappointed that a number of CARIFORUM countries have not yet implemented the tariff reductions which are foreseen in the EPA for EU exports to those countries. And so I think these are three sort of pending issues that we hope to see resolved before too long. But there are also, of course, frustrations on the Caribbean side, which will no doubt come out in the discussion. Amongst them, limited implementation of the Protocol on Cultural Cooperation, visa issues for some countries which make it difficult to provide services, and some uncertainty over the impact of the Samoa Agreement compared to Cotonou. And as mentioned, the Caribbean continues to face structural difficulties linked, as the other speakers have mentioned. They struggle also with EU regulations. Of course, in this, they're not alone. Other trade partners face similar challenges. So we hope that to get agreement soon on a ministerial level meeting, what we call a joint council of the EPA, hopefully in the second quarter of this year. It last met in 2017, so it's high time that it met and provide a political impetus to put the long-standing issues to the past and lay foundations for a fresh start to the EPA. We also hope that it will be an occasion to conclude an EU CARIFORUM agreement on geographic indicators that we think will bring benefits to both sides, including to the niche products benefit mentioned by the previous speaker. As has been also mentioned, I think in looking to the future, there's likely to be an increased focus on investment in line with the EU's Global Gateway strategy, and the next speaker will speak more about this. So the contribution of the EPA to the investment climate is an important factor in this regard. And though these discussions perhaps take place mainly in Geneva, it's important to recall that both the EU and the Caribbean are firm supporters of the multilateral system and of the WTO at a time when its foundations are being shaken. So these contacts have to continue at all levels and also in context of the EPA. So in conclusion, we have a good and unique agreement, but as other speakers have said, there's more that can be done to leverage the partnership between the two regions for our mutual benefit. And I believe that events such as this assembly are an important part of this process. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Mr. Basile, also for your flexibility to step in. Then I go to Mariana Ruiz Alvarado, the head of regional representation of the Caribbean European Investment Bank. And I will check the connection. Are you there? We see you.
Yes.
Yes.
Hello.
So we hear you also. The floor is yours.
Hello. Thank you very much. So my name is Mariana Ruiz Alvarado. Thank you very much for inviting me to speak in this very important assembly. I would like to present to you a little bit what the EIB is, its activities in the Caribbean, and the instruments at our disposal when operating in the region. So the EIB is a body of the European Union, and it is its financial arm. We are the largest multilateral lender in the world, and since our establishment in 1958 as part of the Treaty of Rome, we have funded nearly 15,000 projects in over 160 countries. Last year alone, we signed 100 billion euros in loans. We are headquartered in Luxembourg, but we have 60 offices around the globe. So what is our activity in the Caribbean? Our first operation in the region was in 1978, and since then we have supported 220 projects and 2 billion euro in lending. We are present on the ground through 2 offices, the regional representation based in Santo Domingo, which I lead, and another office in Barbados. As the financial arm of the European Union, we provide financing for capital projects that further EU objectives. Currently, this is primarily done through the EU's Global Gateway initiative. There are 4 important themes that organize our activities in the region. The first is climate change, very important for the Caribbean islands who are very exposed. As the Climate Bank, we are supporting climate change operations in important sectors for the region, such as water and sanitation, waste management, coastal protection, renewable energy, clean transport, sargassum. The second theme is strategic interconnections. The first speaker mentioned very in detail how this is an area where we need to collaborate more, and this is where the European Investment Bank, together with the European Commission, we are looking into how to address electricity networks, maritime connectivity, and also digital interconnections. The third is global public health, where we have been prominently active during the pandemic, and we continue to do so. And in relation to this public health aspect, we can also do additional investments in other social areas such as education. The fourth theme would be critical raw materials, where we aim to support countries who have CRM resources, and not only for the mining, but for the different stages along the supply chain. Along these four areas, we look for win-win partnerships that consider both the priorities of our partner countries and the EU interest. So how do we operate? We can provide finance through public sector investments, both sovereign and sub-sovereign. This means we can lend to government ministries, public bodies, agencies, etc. We also can support the private sector through corporate lending, venture capital, as well as through project finance investments and PPP structures. Another important vehicle is intermediated lending. We can lend through partnered banks, such as, for example, the Caribbean Development Bank, to public banks of each of the countries in the Caribbean, and also commercial banks. We aim to support specific small investments that we cannot do directly through our public sector or corporate venture lending, but are very important, especially in these economies. And we can also target SME lending and also microfinance. We also can do equity through investing in fund or funds of funds. And this is something that we can do either for specific sectors or also for specific regions, such as, for example, small island states. Finally, we can also provide financing by participating in sustainable bond issuance. This is something that the Caribbean is taking on board in the last years. The last development in this area for the bank has been the investment in the Green Global Bond Initiative, where the EIB is the responsible entity for this vehicle, and we have invested and we are managing the funds from other European investors and from the Clean Climate Fund. Through this initiative, the selected fund manager will be able to participate in sustainable bond issuance. We have also a technical assistance that can help first-time issuers or issuers that want to expand to other sustainability themes in their efforts. And let me then finalize, because we have short time, on what are the conditions that make our products interesting for our clients. We are a AAA bank, which means we can have cheap financing in the global market, and we pass these low financing costs to our clients. We have also guarantees from the European Union. This means that when benefiting from the guarantee, we don't have a country risk, and this means we don't need to put a markup on our loans. The third would be that we have technical assistance that can provide support to our clients in the preparation of projects, but also in the implementation, which is a very critical phase, especially, for example, for the procurement. We blend our loans with grants from the European Union and from other donors, including member states. This is providing non-refundable aid. Also, what is very important is to understand that we have long-term financing, both for private sector and for public sector loans with grace periods of up to 1/3 of the term of the loan. Importantly, for the Caribbean, we have introduced disaster clause. These disaster clauses allow the client to hold the repayment of the capital in case of a natural disaster until the economy overcomes the disaster. And finally, we co-finance. We are a player that wants to co-finance our projects with the client or with other banks, multilateral banks, development banks, bilateral banks of the European Union member states. And we do finance in that way up to 50% of the project cost. And in cases of adaptation, we can go up to 100%. Thank you very much, and I'm at your disposal for further information.
Thank you very much, Mariana Ruiz Alvarado. Then we will finally, I would like to introduce Ms. Iswa Ayahan, Deputy Representative and the Head of Office at Interim for the UN Women Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean. She is also one of our guest speakers in a Women Forum, which will start after this session at 5. And we are glad that you get a preview of what you will be discussing also later.
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Thank you very much. The floor is yours.
Yes. Thank you so much for inviting UN Women to convey a few thoughts on this very important issue. I'll start by saying that there is no policy program on any topic that does not have an impact on women and men. And so therefore, we have to understand that speaking about or addressing gender equality gaps is necessary for our development. So this forum itself is an understanding that there are many issues which continue to face SIDS. And this is articulated in the 4th International Conference on SIDS, which was held right here in Antigua and Barbuda, and which produced the ABAS, which is now a critical and important framework, comprehensive framework for sustainable development and for addressing social equality. But we have to really be honest, and I think Dr. Francis and subsequent speakers were quite blunt about the structural challenges that exist to the economies of the Caribbean and how regional integration continues to remain a challenge. And within that, the challenges that women participating in all of these frameworks also experience. So gender equality is not peripheral to trade. It's not peripheral to investment and its economy. But until the structural barriers, cultural, social, economic barriers that I will address in more detail in the Women's Forum this afternoon is overcome, I'm afraid we won't be able to address the ensuing barriers to trade and the impacts of these trade agreements on women and men and the widening gender gaps that can persist unless we address the underlying challenges. So there are fiscal challenges, there are policy-related challenges that limit and impede women's businesses, that impede on their livelihood and impede on their overall economic empowerment. But women can also be drivers of this change, the change that is needed. And we shouldn't really look at women only as beneficiaries of trade and investment, but as key players in economic transformation. And so let's discuss not only in this forum, but hopefully in the Women's Forum that will ensue this afternoon. Let's discuss some key facts. In many countries in the Caribbean, where women continue to be central economic actors, they own 40% or more of micro, small, and medium enterprises. And they're heavily represented across tourism, across hospitality, retail, agro-processing, creative industries, and services. Sectors that are fundamental for trade performance and fundamental for regional competitiveness. But at the same time, women entrepreneurs remain structurally underfinanced and underconnected within this productive ecosystem. Despite their economic presence, the barriers persist. They receive 10 times less financing than male-owned businesses, with average medium and long-term loans estimated at United States dollars 156,000 compared to USD 1.554 million. And access to collateral remains a major constraint, limiting the ability of women entrepreneurs to grow and to formalize and participate in higher value markets, including those that will lead the export-oriented growth that we hope to see. And so the evidence shows that women entrepreneurs are not only excluded from economic life in many respects, but they are actively marginalized. And unlocking this potential requires targeted investment instruments, stronger enabling environments, stronger measures that address issues that may seem to be peripheral to the discussions around trade, but actually aren't. Care burdens, financial inclusion, safety. These are barriers that women face regardless, but of course, unless we address these underlying and structural barriers, they will carry over into their ability to participate in trade. So according to global IFC data, women-led MSMEs face a $1.7 trillion financing gap globally. And in the Caribbean, access to trade finance and export guarantees remain particularly limited for women entrepreneurs. So we need gender-responsive macroeconomic policies that have to do some deeper analysis on the benefits, on the role of women and men to see where the gaps are and to actively, in these instruments and policies, close those gaps. We need to champion women's participation and leadership in influencing our economic development and continue to engage with women's organizations, and the EU has been at the forefront of this along with a suite of other development partners in the region, and I must commend the EU for its efforts in this regard. And to continue to work with national government stakeholders to incentivize decent work, equal pay, and entrepreneurship. So, in terms of macroeconomic policies, higher interest rates mean that it will be harder for small or new businesses where women are overrepresented to access loans. When banks become increasingly more risk averse, it means that they place a premium or preference for established asset-owning borrowers, often men. When we have reduced liquidity and microfinance and community lenders shrink, who is disproportionately affected? Women entrepreneurs. MSMEs account for over 50% of GDP and employment across Caribbean economies and form the backbone of the private sector. And women therefore play a central role in this ecosystem, and yet their businesses remain structurally underfinanced and underconnected. Women-owned firms receive 10 times less financing, as I said, and 39% of women-led MSMEs identify collateral requirements as a reason for their exclusion from the economy and from trade. Despite high female labor participation, only 20.5% of firms have gender equality measures in place, which also limits innovation. So we are not taking advantage of the fact that Caribbean women actually are more highly educated than men. The underinvestment in turning that opportunity, the fact that they're actually more highly educated, into women being more active in the economy, you see the results. I think it's an underutilization of this talent. And women-owned small businesses in the Caribbean are also overrepresented in the informal economy. Many operate in climate-exposed sectors, such as tourism, retail, food services, and so on, and are more likely to remain closed longer after disasters. Where is the pathway to the climate financing instruments for women entrepreneurs operating in that ecosystem? And climate shocks also intensify protection risks, including gender-based violence, sexual exploitation, and human trafficking. So I'll end by saying that I think all of these considerations have to, of course, become at the forefront of our discourse on trade in order to maximize the gains that have been made. And when we look at the gender equality gains in this region, we see, when compared to others, that we've really made a lot of progress. But it's really about how do we narrow those gender equality gaps to ensure that all women and men and girls and boys really benefit from the progress that has been made so far. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Iswa Iahan, also for stressing out that the importance of gender equality also in the economy and in trade. I will now open the discussion, and I will start with the first member. She's also the Vice President of Carniform. Her name is Anna-Maya Hendriksen. Please, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you to all the speakers. Trade today is not only about tariffs. It's about how we position our regions in a world that is becoming more fragmented and more uncertain due to the geopolitical tensions. The EU CARIFORUM Economic Partnership Agreement gives us a strong base, and I think that we can see that, everyone in this room. It provides stability, predictability, and market access. But we must ask ourselves a simple question. Are we using its full potential? That's the question. Open trade is not an abstract principle. It's a practical necessity. Protectionism may sound reassuring in times of crisis, but it ultimately reduces growth, limits innovation, and increases costs for citizens. So closing markets does not make us safer, it makes us smaller. At the same time, openness cannot mean being naive. Trade must be fair, it must be enforceable, and it must create opportunity on both sides. And that means helping Caribbean businesses navigate standards, access finance, and move up value chains. And this is where Global Gateway becomes concrete. Let me take some examples. We have already heard of some of them. In Barbados, the EU is supporting the first green hydrogen energy storage facility in the Caribbean, strengthening energy independence and reducing fossil fuel dependency. Across the region, the Sargassum Initiative is transforming a climate-driven environmental crisis into industrial opportunity and job creation. Through the Digital Alliance, Europe and the Caribbean are deepening cooperation in connectivity, innovation, and technology, strengthening competitiveness for the future. So these are practical examples of what strategic partnership looks like. Investment that builds resilience, cooperation that reinforces sovereignty, and projects that create opportunity. Parliament's role is not to applaud strategies, it's to ensure delivery. And Europe and the Caribbean, dear friends, can respond to global uncertainty with hesitation and inward reflexes, or we can demonstrate that open, rules-based cooperation remains the strongest path to prosperity and stability. So let us choose the openness with confidence, and let us choose partnership with purpose, and let this assembly set that tone from the very beginning, and let's put some pressure on our ministers I say as a former minister. And also, let us see that we also have the women with us, also in businesses. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you very much, Ms. Hendrickson. Then I will go to Honourable Member Barry Griffin from the BMS. Mr. Griffin.
Co-presidents, honourable members, colleagues, friends. Listening to today's presentations and discussion, I'm struck by one simple reality. The European Union and the Caribbean now have an opportunity that did not exist when the Economic Partnership Agreement was first negotiated. At that time, our relationship was largely about trade preferences and development cooperation. Today, the global economy is reorganizing, supply chains are shifting, digital services are expanding, and middle power partnerships are becoming more important. In this new world, the Caribbean should not only be seen as a beneficiary of engagement with Europe, we should be seen as a strategic partner. In fact, in conversations today with my European colleagues, I sense a renewed interest in looking to the Caribbean as a truly strategic trade and economic partner, as old alliances and old ways of doing things can no longer be relied on. The EPA gave us a legal framework. The Global Gateway gives us a practical instrument. What we need now is a shared economic project. Allow me to suggest a constructive way forward. 3 areas where we can deepen cooperation together. First, building joint value chains. Rather than focusing only on exporting finished goods across oceans, we can begin co-producing. Caribbean economies are stable, English-speaking, geographically positioned between North and South America, and connected to global financial and professional services. European firms looking for nearshore production, services support, or regional distribution can find reliable partners in our region. We should actively identify sectors like logistics, agro-processing, pharmaceutical support services, and business services where EU and Caribbean companies can cooperate as part of the same value chain. Second, investment that reaches firms, not only projects. Large infrastructure is of course important, but economic transformation only happens, as some of the speakers suggested, when small and mid-sized companies grow. If Global Gateway financing and European financial institutions are paired with Caribbean private sector development, I mean certification, standards, and export readiness, then market access becomes real for our entrepreneurs, not just theoretical in our agreements. Third, mobility of skills and digital trade. The Caribbean's fastest growing export may not be a product. It may very well be our talent. Our professionals, creatives, and digital entrepreneurs are already working across borders virtually. By advancing mutual recognition of qualifications, easier temporary mobility, and cooperation in digital services, we create trade that does not depend on shipping distance. This is where small island economies can genuinely compete. So, colleagues, the Caribbean is one of the most pro-multilateral, pro-European regions in the world. We share democratic values, legal traditions, and deep historical connections. What we are proposing is not a new agreement, but a new phase, moving from a development relationship to a partnership of co-investment and co-production. If we approach the EPA and the Global Gateway in this spirit, the EU and Caribbean partnership can become a model, not north-south, but partners in shaping stability and prosperity together in a changing and increasingly unstable and unreliable global economy. And I can assure you, in the Caribbean, you have willing, stable, and reliable partners ready to build that future with you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Griffin. I'm going to Darius Jonsky.
Thank you, Co-President. I would like to thank for very interesting speeches. And I would like to say that for us, the Caribbean is not only a close partner of the European Union, but also a strategically important region with the enormous potential for sustainable growth, innovation and regional integration. Through the Economic Partnership Agreement, we have created a framework for trade and cooperation, and with the Global Gateway Strategy, we have committed ourselves to supporting sustainable and high-quality investment. However, the key challenge today is to ensure that this instrument translates into real opportunities for local business, strengthen regional value chains, and contribute to long-term economic resilience. And I have one question to Patricia Francis, looking ahead. What reforms or new instruments are needed to make European Union and Caribbean trade and investment cooperation more resilient, sustainable, and fit for the geopolitical and economic challenges of the future? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Jonsky. Then I go to Honourable Member Caroline Trench-Sandiford.
Good afternoon, and thanks to all the speakers, presenters. Quite a lot of knowledge you have shared, and we thank you for that. I want to put on the record that Belize looks forward to the Global Gateway Investment Agenda. We feel that it offers a unique opportunity to reinforce the 4 pillars of our trade policy, but also to build on the gains of the Economic Partnership Agreement. I can, for the record, say that in regards to market access, for example, through the EPA, the EU has supported Belize to gain expanded access for exports of sugarcane, bananas, lobster, cacao, and orange. We have, to some extent, relatively balanced free trade relationship, which truly underscores the importance of the EPA in sustaining the flow of goods, even as Belize works to diversify its products. On supply capacity, we can say that the EU funding has strengthened our productive sectors, and even though challenges do exist and remain, we continue to work on these to maximize the benefits of the EPA. On institutional strengthening, Belize has consistently implemented EPA obligations. We have reduced tariffs, advanced trade liberalization, modernized customs, enacted data protection legislation, and is progressing laws on competition and geographic indications. EU-funded projects have also built technical capacity in customs, procurement, and competition, laying the foundation for stronger governance and consumer protection. Finally, on trade facilitation, there has been technology transfer. This has been very pivotal for us. It has enabled us to reduce the time and cost of exports by onboarding key institutions, directly improving competitiveness for Belizean goods. So we look forward to the Global Gateway Investment Agenda. We see opportunities for investment in green and digital infrastructure, renewable energy, resilient systems that will support our diversification, boost our competitiveness, and align with Belize's National Plan for Sustainable Development. Within the framework provided by the EPA and the GIA, this can provide the fuel to ensure that the partnership with the European Union continues to deliver concrete benefits anchored in sustainability, innovation, and shared prosperity. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Ms. Trench-Sandiford. Then I'm going to Mr. Biedro.
Thank you very much, Co-Chair, and thank you very much to distinguished speakers for their very interesting interventions on trade. But when we speak about trade, EU, Caribbean trade, or any other trade, we always speak about people. about workers, about small entrepreneurs, very often women, as we heard from the previous speaker, young people looking for their opportunities and forced very often to leave their countries and communities facing the front line of climate crisis. And trade policy always must serve them. The Economic Partnership Agreement between the European Union and Caribbean provides a strong framework for that. Yet today, stability and fairness in the global trade cannot be taken for granted. We heard this story often today. Rising protectionism, fragile supplies chains, growing inequalities require us to rethink how we shape our partnerships. In this context, I want to recall, quote Prime Minister Brownie today, who said, "We choose partnership over fragmentation." And in a world of change, we need reliable partners, and so we are. And as a co-rapporteur for the future Global Europe instrument, I see clearly that investment policy is also a social policy. Where and how we invest determines who benefits from that. For the Caribbean, investment must strengthen resilience and reduce inequalities. We are neighbors. We have common borders. Guadeloupe, where our colleague Rodi Talassi, MEP, but also citizen of EU, comes. Martinique, Aruba, Curacao, San Martin. Those are the bridges with other Caribbean countries and territories. The question to our speakers is how we benefit from that. How do we build cooperation on that? Trade must also respect workers' rights. The fear for food insecurity, electricity prices, cost of living is a serious fear. Now, the question is, how do we answer that? The question is, how do we build our partnership that delivers to these workers, delivers to these people, delivers to these female little small entrepreneurs who need to find the link between this partnership and their daily life? And this is a question to our speakers, how to build it for the future. How do we anchor Global Gateway in the local reality so the local communities also benefit from this partnership, not only big investors who have access to these funds? Those are the questions from that we need to answer. We might be divided by ocean, but we share similar values. We share similar vision. We trust to each other, but we need to deliver to these average people who are waiting for answers. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Mr. Biedron. Now I would like to give the floor to the Minister of Foreign Affairs, Your Excellency, Mr. Green. The floor is yours.
Thank you, co-chairs, and I can see that lunch was certainly useful. This triggered a very robust debate in another very important subject matter. I'd want to address the issue at hand, that is the future of EU-Caribbean trade. With a review of our 18 years since signing the agreement, an agreement which we hailed as a new model for development. 18 years on, I want to candidly assess what we've covered, the achievements, the gaps. And I want to suggest to us that this promise of the partnership remains largely unfulfilled for many of us. Let's examine some of the hard facts, as I'd call them. Because in a meeting like this, we need to examine that which really obtains. For a small economy like Antigua and Barbuda, the EPA provides 100% duty-free access to EU markets. Notwithstanding, in 2023, our total exports to the EU was merely $60,000 US. In 2024, it crept to $124,000 United States dollars. In that regard, it is safe to conclude that our partnership is underperforming and that the celebrated benefits of the market access remain theoretical for micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises. We cannot claim a real collaboration between EU firms and our producers to get our rum, or fresh fish, or fruits onto the supermarket shelves across the EU region. The agreement has facilitated EU exports to our region far more effectively than it has helped to diversify our own trade portfolios. And why, one may ask? That's because the EPA's implementation has focused on liberalization while neglecting the very foundation on which it was signed. That is the Development Cooperation. Article 7 and Article 8 of the agreement covering development assistance and cooperation priorities respectively are not optional extras. They are the engine that are supposed to make this trade work. All firms in Antigua and Barbuda are small, operate in fragmented markets and face prohibitive costs in energy and logistics. They lack the capacity to meet EU technical standards or navigate non-tariff barriers. And without targeted, tangible assistance, we are asking our businesses to compete in a Formula One race on a bicycle. I have used and very deliberately so, the very graphic approach to explaining, describing what is meant to us here in Antigua and Barbuda. And I want to posit for your consideration what we in Antigua would consider the next steps as we prepare for the 5-year review of the EPA this year. My first suggestion is a reset. That we pivot from simply trading goods to building genuine sectoral partnerships. Our future is not just bananas and rum. It is in the 70% of our economy that is services, in sustainable tourism, in digital animation and design, in health and wellness, and maritime services. Co-chairs, I wish to make 3 clear and actionable recommendations to this onerous assembly. 1, we need joint ventures. We need EU investment in our creative and digital industries, not just the traditional sectors. Create financial instruments and matchmaking platforms that connect Caribbean MSMEs with European investors to build export capacity. I'm suggesting we move from market access. The EU must deliver, in second place, must deliver on the development cooperation provisions of the EPA. This means tangible technical assistance to help our firms meet EU standards and direct support for technologies transfer, as outlined in Article 142, to build our innovative capacity in agriculture and the green economy. In short, again, I'm advocating that we unlock the development mandate. And thirdly, finally, for those who wish that I take my seat, as a takeaway from this historic meeting, let us resolve to modernize the agreement. The EPA must reflect the 21st century economy. We need a specific focus on digital transformation, on e-commerce, and the green transition. We need a one e-portal for real-time export opportunities and programs that help our businesses sell online to European consumers. Honorable colleagues, the EU is undeniably our most important partner. Equally true is the fact that our partnership requires balance. I therefore encourage us to use the 2026 review not just to tick the boxes, but to build the bridges, provide the resources and create the opportunities that will finally make the EPA work for all of our people. I thank you.
Thank you very much, His Excellency. I think it's worthful words, and it's also quite concrete, and it's also quite necessary, I think, in this exchange. So thank you very much, and I'm also curious how the panelists will also reflect on this. Then I go to Mr. Tolassi, Rodi Tolassi, and I think you need then the translation because it's in French. Oui.
Bon, désolé. Merci, Monsieur le Co-président, chers collègues. Les accords de partenariat.
Economic partnership agreements, together with strategic investments like Global Gateway, mean that we can cooperate better over the whole world. It's not just about goods, it's about infrastructure, sustainable infrastructure, strengthening local communities and strengthening supply chains and ensuring fair trade. The CARIFORUM EU agreement signed back in 2008 shows that we're not just talking about goods, we're talking about services, investment, competition policy, intellectual property, public procurement, and the Sustainable Development Goals. It is a comprehensive economic framework. But the underlying question remains. Do these tools actually enable us to develop? For outermost regions, such as my own, there is a clear danger. These agreements must build local capacity, must improve digital, industrial and agricultural supply chains, and must improve our provision of supply. We must not just be importers or exporters. We need to have strengthened regional partnerships. Cooperation with the other Caribbean countries is extremely important, and it can help to deal with the fact that life here is very expensive by improving regional trade and by diversifying our supply. We must also understand the geopolitical circumstances. Europe is already in the heart of the Caribbean, thanks to the outermost regions, particularly the French ones. So the EU is legally, institutionally, and economically present in this part of the world. Our territories are not the outermost regions. We are really front and center. Guadeloupe will play a role as a bridge between Europe and the Caribbean. Its geographical situation and its legal certainty and status mean that we are a bridge in deep waters, and we are a regional and logistic hub. By improving our port infrastructure, Guadeloupe can become a strategic anchor point for commercial trade flows, as well as energy and industrial trade flows between the two parts of the world. The EU has a legal and political obligation. It must adapt its rules and regulations to the reality of the outermost regions. If that doesn't happen, it could affect development and competitiveness in the outermost regions. Europe must be demanding but pragmatic. Our ambition must be clear. We must transform so that we can reduce costs for our local people and so that we can have sustainable development for our populations. Our outermost regions must not be sidelined. They must be seen as strategic centers of influence, bridges between Europe and the Caribbean. But since 2011, I'll stop there. Thank you.
Merci. Did you make it? Oh, c'est bon.
Ouais.
Merci beaucoup.
Ouais. OK. Merci, Monsieur Tolassi, pour votre intervention.
Thank you very much for that intervention.
Thank you. Even before the signing of the Treaty of Sagaramos and the CARICOM Agreement, Jamaica was already a trade hub. Therefore, it comes as no surprise that Jamaica has got some solid economic and trade partnership on deck, making it a prime spot for investment in the Caribbean. Let's break it down. CARIFORUM, EU, Economic Partnership Agreement, EPA. Jamaica has duty-free and quota-free access to the European market for many products. CARICAN, Caribbean-Canadian Trade Agreement, provides duty-free export of goods to Canada with some exceptions. Caribbean Basin Initiative, the CIB, offer duty-free quota-free access for Caribbean products to the U.S. market. Jamaica-China Agreement on Economic and Technical Cooperation strengthens economic ties with China, focusing on tariff reduction and investment facility. CARICOM Single Market and Economic, CSME, facilitate free movement of goods, service, capital, and labor among the CARICOM member states. Jamaica has been working on becoming a top investment destination in the Caribbean, with a stable macroeconomy, environment, and investor-friendly policies. The country is focusing on sectors like logistics, technology, and agro-processing. The Logistic Hub Initiative and Special Economic Zone are also key areas for investment, offering opportunity for growth and job creation. Jamaica's investment guide, iGuide, is available online, providing info on investment opportunity and sectors like manufacturing, agribusiness, and energy. But at the same time, we do understand that it provides some amount of negative impacts, which means increased competition. The local industry might struggle to compete with cheaper import, potential leading to job losses. On the market, we realize that we have a lot of trade imbalance, and so it heavily depends on foreign investment, non-tariff barrier, and environmental and social concern. Increased investment trade might lead to environmental degradation and social issue if not managed sustainable. The underutilization of agreement. Jamaica trade agreements are underutilized with low usage rate and limited export diversification. The country faces challenges in meeting EU standards and negativity, complete regulation. To mitigate these risks, Jamaica should focus on diversifying its economic investment in infrastructure and promoting sustainable development. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Clark. Then I'm going to Juan Fernando Lopez Aguilar.
Thank you so much, Co-President Tahmani. Actually, I'm very well impressed about the presentations we heard of and the insights as to the importance of trade in development opportunities in the Caribbean, just like elsewhere. For one thing, the European Union started out by trade, by making a difference, a political difference, through trade. And I would actually raise a question directly, mostly to Patricia, Francis, and Paolo Garzetti, which represented here the European Commission. And the thing is, when it comes to small island states, of course, difference is of relevance. When it comes to trade, you gotta go into details. And the question is, how is the European Union to do better by accounting for the differences in size and population and capacity building and capacity to engage into trade cooperation in island states of different size, different population? Can we do better in order to account for those details, to look into detail of the situation of every individual country, so that the global gateway is not a label, but actually is a focus on which we can actually care for the capacities of every individual state? And a second question related to the first is, how can we be meaningful in order to build the sense of region in the Caribbean? Considering that when you're in an island, you're always in your island. I come from an island myself. I come from the Canary Islands, and whenever I'm asked, are you going to the Canaries? I listen, I'm going to Gran Canaria or maybe to Tenerife, but you're never in the islands. You're in an island, because every island is a world in itself. How could we do better in order to build a sense of region in the Caribbean? Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lopez Aguilar. Finally on my list, dus I don't hope that I miss someone, but finally on my list, Mr. Freud. The floor is yours, Diane.
Thanks, Chair. Well, I think after a long period of more and more trade and liberalization in the world, unfortunately, we've now entered a period again, you know, where some, at least presidents and heads of state, throw around with tariffs and use trade to coerce other countries, entire blocs like the European Union. And I guess the smaller your economies, the smaller your countries, the more vulnerable you are to this new world, which is no longer based on rules and fair engagement, but basically just whoever is the strongest takes whatever they want. And I think in this new world, I think what the Canadian Prime Minister said in Davos, that all those still interested in rules-based order, all those still interested in, you know, liberal market economies working together, democracies working together, I think that's what we need to do, right? And from all I've heard here today, you know, that is something that binds the Caribbean and the European Union. So we have a solid basis, but I think that's something we need to build on here now. The foreign minister has said that the potential of the EPA is not fully used yet, and I think we can all see that from the numbers. But I think it's something to start with and to build that relationship, and, you know, making sure that both sides benefit, that European companies benefit from that trade, but obviously also that Caribbean companies do get better access to the European market, and that this can be beneficial for both sides. I think that's what we're going for. Thank you.
Certainly, Mr. Fred. Thank you very much. Well, I would like now to turn to the floor to the guest speakers, and I will start with Patricia Francis, if she's still contacted, because there were also some questions raised towards you. Ms. Francis, are you there?
Yes, I'm here.
Perfect.
Perhaps I'll start with size, because there was a question about how do we deal with size. There was also a question from the Antiguan MP about, or PS, about the issue of small exports from Antigua into the EU. And when I think about small populations and I think about production from small producers, I like to equate it with what I find in Europe you call artisanal products. The products are located about a particular region, maybe even a village, and it has a particular story about it, it has a particular taste about it, because it is associated with some kind of cultural activity or cultural heritage that exists. And having lived in Switzerland for quite a long time, I love my artisanal cheeses. And I love the French artisanal tea. You know, you get all these different things. And I believe that there is a market for these unique products that are only available in small quantities. But what's missing in our Caribbean area, and this is probably for Caribbean export, is the design-led, the quality assurance that one has to have in place in order to ensure that the product actually matches what the market needs. Generally speaking, what I have witnessed in the Caribbean is people produce something and then they want to figure out, where can I sell it? Life doesn't work like that. You have to start from the market and work back. How are you going to adapt what you have to the market? And I think that there are many unique things in each one of our islands which need to be perfected. And I think Jamaica is doing a good job. When I go into the supermarket today, I see some of the things that we used to buy on the side of the road now being nicely packaged so that one knows that the phytosanitary issues around the production of these things, sweets that we used to buy on the side of the road, are now done in a way where health and safety and traceability are in place. And that's the kind of seriousness that we have to, in each one of our islands, ensure that we can put a mechanism in place. And of course, what's missing in order to get development to take place is always the ecosystem around building these kinds of capacities and capability. Always there seems to be something missing. And when that piece is missing, it's very difficult to actually end up with a product which meets the standards at the end of the day. So there really needs to be, and perhaps our French colleagues and may be willing to provide some support with the work that they do with the artisanal producers. And it is about the relationships that we can build. It is about the chambers of commerce getting in touch with the chambers of commerce. It is about the standards organizations being more familiar. It is about recognition of our standards. We need to have our standards organizations. We need mutual recognition agreements. If we can move to mutual recognition agreements, that would be very important in ensuring and that our products are meeting the standards and that the European market is happy that we have lived up to the standards that are required there in the marketplace. This is something which is, I think, also important for our own consumers. Our own consumers should certainly be glad to know that where was this product produced? Was it made, if it was made in someone's kitchen, was the kitchen in good shape? Did it pass some quality control? Did someone come in and inspect? Did it get a certification of some sign? So I think that there are, we have to find a way to package for the tiny. We already, I think, know how to do the large, and certainly the medium fits in there somewhere else. But clearly, right across the region, there is a deficit with respect to standards, organizations that support the development of these standards and bring all of that together with design capability, with understanding the market requirements, and not making it so complicated that everybody bows out. So there is that. There's also probably also when we look at the numbers, we're not capturing the digital marketing and the digital trade that is taking place. This is something that I think is important that we start looking at. I've been watching the Winter Olympics, and all of a sudden I see my Jamaican bobsled team is now advertising for Fiat. Well, that's trade taking place. Our bobsled team is obviously being paid to advertise for Fiat because they have a panache. Are those numbers being counted as part of trade? So that's part of our culture being, I don't think it's being expropriated if indeed our people are being paid. If they were not being paid, then of course it would be expropriation. But I would hardly think that they would be in a position to do that. So there are new opportunities. There are new opportunities for cooperation. Yesterday, I just spoke to someone who is who just talks about Jamaican culture. She has a YouTube platform, and her second largest group of people out of the first is the United States, second is Europe. European people interested in her Jamaican culture. None of that is being counted. So there are things happening in the new economy which are falling between the cracks in terms of being able to capture what is taking place. So I think small, very, very important that we find a strategy around making sure that we don't leave the smallest man behind. And we also need to make sure that we can put, we in the Caribbean need to have the support of the European Union in order to build our capability of putting those things in place which are necessary to cross your border. How can we optimize trade? Okay, but at the same time talk about size, yes, I think. How do we build a better identity as a region? Well, you know, we are a region when we play cricket. You know, so we are the West Indies team when we're playing cricket. But we are individual countries when we are playing football, let's say, for example. We don't have a Caribbean football team. We certainly are all competing on each one of our countries are competing against each other. But when we look at the way that our tourism product is actually advertised, there is a Caribbean image out there, and there is a large amount, but this is perhaps mainly looking into the US market because of the cruise ship industry. And so the cruise ship industry sells the Caribbean, and it sells certain destinations in the Caribbean, but it's selling a Caribbean product. So the Caribbean does have an image, but it depends on what market is looking at it and how we ourselves could probably do a lot better in how we actually use the whole image of ourselves as a region.
Ms. Francis, may I
Yes.
ask you to conclude?
Yes, I'm just thinking, was there anything else? Instruments. The last thing I would say is I really believe that there is a fledgling private equity market here in the Caribbean now. There are various organizations that are being put together, various funds that are being put together. The ecosystem for financial instruments is not well built out. And here is another area where I think if we were to put a focus on ensuring that we actually worked on building out that infrastructure, then a lot could happen as a result of that. And I'll conclude.
Thank you very much, Ms. Francis. Thank you very much for your contribution this afternoon. Thank you very much. Then I'm going to Mr. Basil on the remote. And please, a few minutes of reflection.
Thank you, and thank you to everyone, actually, for a very stimulating discussion, which certainly opens perspectives beyond, you might say, the conventional trade, and also welcome the attention to the gender dimension, knowing how important that is in the Caribbean. There was one question on OCTs, overseas countries and territories, and this link which is undeveloped, I think, and there's certainly more potential. There is now increasing interest and funding from we call it DG Regio, so the part of the European Commission that's responsible for regional development in the overseas regions, not overseas countries and territories, in the overseas regions. And I think this is something we'll need to look at in more detail in the context of the EPA, to see also that there's certainly interest in the Caribbean, the overseas regions of the EU in the Caribbean, also in providing lower cost products to their consumers, which has been a source of tension recently. So to the extent that the region can help deliver on that, I think that will be very positive. Then there was a very good, perceptive question, I would say, on how do we, for small island economies, how does one get down to the level of detail that is necessary in the context of these big trade flows? And I gave the example of, the trade flows from Guyana, which are basically dwarfing many of the other trade flows and run the risk of hiding them. And I don't have a full answer. I think every administration has resource constraints, so it's the usual answer would be efficiency and clear communication, so that there are clear messages from the countries. But maybe one route that, in terms of global gateway, that we're going is not to treat capacity building and investment as separate flows, you might see. Then we get a rather scattered impact. So the trend now is to look at these things together. So you have, let's say, an initiative on sargassum, and then you're talking about the technology, but also the research, and also the markets and so on, and the associate training, all for digital. So to think I think some big themes around which you build these other activities, and in which the different islands can find themselves. That seems to be the trend we're going in, because, as I say, being able to tailor-made programs for each island, I think is not very realistic currently. So I would, I think that's a sort of broad issues, but I think also the general message I take away from this is that there's a lot of communication. As always, communication is good. It's good to talk. It's good to understand each other. And I think forums such as this are serving a very useful purpose in helping develop the relationship. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Basil, for your contribution also this afternoon. Then I'm going to give the floor also on remote Mariana Ruiz Alvarado.
Thank you very much. I want to briefly respond to two comments from Mr. Piedra. The first on the workers' rights and the second about local communities. So at the European Investment Bank, we have our own environmental and social standards, which we have to apply to every project that we fund. This is based on EU legislation. So we pass those principles of workers' rights to our projects. On local communities, I think one particular point that is very important is the development of the strategic procurement. At the EIB, we have developed this strategic procurement that for governments that are interested in applying those, they can come with us and look at what kind of standards and criteria we can insert into procurement processes that go beyond normal legislation, where they want to focus and ensure that there are additional standards or additional benefits on environment, on climate change, on social, on gender, on circular economy, and work on those. For those governments or those parties that don't want to only focus on finding the least costly project, but that want to fund a good project that is a good project for the social and the community. And I will leave it at that. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for you, Mariana Ruiz Alvarado, for contributing also on the discussion this afternoon. Then I'm looking to Mr. Damien Sinanan, if you want to take the floor.
Yes, thank you so much. I really enjoyed the discussions that we've had this afternoon. I think we really covered a lot of the areas that needed to be discussed in terms of really expanding cooperation between the European Union and CARIFORUM. I just wanted to touch on two things. I mean, just to build on what Ms. Francis was saying. In order for us to greater penetrate the European Union market, we have to meet the international standards. That takes investment. But just to say that if we meet the standards and packaging for the EU market, we practically meet the standards and packaging for all markets around the world. So it's really an investment into market access and the ability to reach new markets outside of our traditional Caribbean markets. I also wanted to talk about brand building. We have to look as SMEs how we build our brand, and sometimes that means our country brand, sometimes that can be our regional brand. Around the world we hear about Moroccan oils, we hear about Dubai chocolates. These things are viral, to use the young people terms. It's going viral and it's free marketing and it drives buyers to your product, and that story doesn't even have to be real. We can just make it up and say Trinidad and Tobago chocolates are the best chocolates in the world and it was eaten by Amerindians and all of that stuff. That's the kind of buzz we have to create amongst our products so that we can find these niche markets to penetrate and, gain a foothold. And we have to look at scaling as well, and scaling requires access to finance. We have underdeveloped capital markets here in the Caribbean region. We have to develop options such as equity financing, venture capital. We also have to look at a regional stock market that will allow companies to attract investment into companies and to allow for investors to exit, which is what we're severely lacking at this point in time. So I'll just leave those 3 points right there, and I'd like to say thank you for having me and wish the best for the rest of this forum.
Thank you very much, Mr. Sinadal, for your contribution also. And then I'm looking for the final contribution of Ms. Ishua Yahan.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Just to focus my feedback on the normative issues, the policy issues, and that as we consider economic policy development and within that trade policy development and the ecosystems around that, we continue to have an equity focus. Not only on gender equality, but how that intersects with disability status, with indigenous rights, location, and where one is located in our geographies. I think all of these intersectionalities have to permeate our policy frameworks across the board, including on trade, and the alignment of this with our gender policies, our education policies, our policies on digital, and so on. All of these intersect. So I really want to encourage countries to continue placing a premium despite the pushback on gender equality and even the debate around the word gender, which is why I will continue to use that word gender and maybe even the F word, feminist policies as preeminent in our discourse in order to ensure that the tremendous progress that has been made in the region is not reversed. Yes, and in conclusion, I want to also say that the structural barriers I mentioned in my remarks are not necessarily situated in discourses around trade. If a woman is not able to access care services, not able to, as we consider the demographic transition, care for elderly parents, and so she's going to have less time to be an entrepreneur. She's going to have less time to be able to invest in her business, to be able to make her business export ready and trade ready. So I think all of the intersectionalities of all of these issues should remain preeminent in our policy discourse. Thank you.
Thank you so much. Well, thank you all. I think we are now coming to the end of this session, and I would like to thank you for your fruitful contribution, inspiring discussion. I think we have enough also to be reflected also in the recommendation that we will adopt on Wednesday. I think as lawmakers, what we also are as politicians, our job is also to create a trade environment that is sustainable and benefits our region economies, in the end, our people. And, well, it's already said a few times today, our rule-based order, our rule-based systems are under attack, and it means also that economic nationalism intensifies in some parts of the world. It's also reflected on gender equality and a discussion about that. Because for me, is that quite certain that we are here as friends and that we need to build on further, as the Minister of Foreign Affairs also was mentioning. Well, the expectations were much in the past more higher than we delivered, and I think it's now the right timing that we step up our forces. We will now have a short break. We will continue our work with the Women Forum that will be chaired by Ms. Hendrickson. I invite you all to participate and engage also with inspiring female leaders. And I would like to thank you for this session. Thank you. Yeah? Okay, I don't know. Okay. Yeah. I think Ms. Trent. Ms. Trench, Sandy4, you are also co-chairing or not the session? No? Who? You will chair. Very good, Mr. Griffin.
Just wrapping things up, Jamie, for this second session, the afternoon session. Just stepping back a little bit so that our camera operator can get. The challenge has been in this location, just having individuals passing by. It's unavoidable because it's a very active environment as well. Here with us is Minister Honorable E.P. Chet Green. A very quick word for me, Minister Green, in terms of how the afternoon session went. You called for the EPA to be reworked, essentially. Tell me about that.
Yeah, the EPA has been around for what, 18 years, and it has focused primarily on goods, trading goods, not much to do with anything at all to do with services. And so my observation today was, as we go into a review of the EPA later this year, 2026, that we bring into focus those challenges that are faced by countries like ours with a heavy dependence on services. We're happy for the countries that have made good of the EPA provisions. Those are the manufacturing goods. But for those of us who are service-oriented, we need to have some relook and recalibration, if I may say so, of the provisions of the EPA.
Perhaps as good a time as any for that recalibration, because generally right now we're seeing a recalibration of so many other things, including the geopolitical order as well. You gave some statistics there. Myself and Jamie were talking about that a bit earlier on. Jamie will join us shortly. $60,000 in terms of goods.
We really have not done any major exports to the EU market, and that's why I made the observation too that the arrangements are skewed. You can't find Cavalier now English Arbor rum on the shelves of supermarkets and in the bars in the European Union area. Neither can we, or do we have any ease of access with respect to our seafoods, which are two areas that we are very, very, much are organized and able to export. And so it is for that kind of observation that the call has been made for the recalibration. You're right, it's recalibration season, so might as well we add EPA to it.
Jimmy.
I mean, you did say that cabin businesses have been asked to compete in a Formula One race with a bicycle. In practical terms, what's missing from this bicycle and who needs to provide it?
Well, I think the answer was really given the answer I gave to your colleague, that we need to have the EPA relooked to include services. Unless services involved and included in the construct, countries like ours that are big and high on trading and services, will be left, will always be lagging. And so the numbers you heard me quote this a while ago will continue with the numbers. Yes, we continue to try to improve our productive and manufacturing industries. But the truth is ours is an economy predominantly based on services. And so if we have services included in a revised EPA, Antigua and Barbuda, trust me, will be a greater beneficiary from the agreement.
All right, Minister, I know you have to run. Your team is waiting on you as well, because looking forward to tomorrow. Just a quick word. What are you most looking forward to tomorrow?
Tomorrow we're doing multilateralism, and that is, of course, a topic that is going to be of quintessential importance to us. All the topics are aligned, it seems. So this morning we had climate issues this afternoon. We dealt with trade. Tomorrow we'll deal with the whole issue of, multilateralism. And we got a chance to basically recast, reposition, resubmit our foreign policy posture on this subject matter.
All right, of course, Haiti on Wednesday.
Well, Haiti, of course, the Board of Caribbean Civilization is a special subject, special project, and we will again speak to that when the agenda item arises.
So all the best for the rest of it. Thanks so much for talking with us. Really appreciate it. Minister. Indeed. As he should. Thanks very much, Minister. Really appreciate it. Minister for Foreign Affairs, as well as Trade and Barbados Affairs, Honorable E.P. Chen Green, speaking with us about pretty much this session that we had. One of the key discussions, Jamie, has been in relation to the African, Caribbean and Pacific states and the EU has always been about trade, and the economic partnership agreements signed in 2008 was a huge part of that. Before that, there was a big talk about in terms of preferential trade into the EU from the ACP states, and even before we went from ACP group to the OACPS. So when it was the ACP group, the African, Caribbean, Pacific states, there was a signing of the Lomé Convention following the Georgetown Agreement in 1975, and that paved the way for preferential treatment or preferential access of sugar, bananas, and other products from the Caribbean and from Africa and the Pacific into the European Union. But of course, the WTO said, no, not so fast. That's not right. That's not correct, because other countries were complaining about it. And so that actually triggered what we now have as the economic partnership agreements. Your take on some of the other key points coming out of Minister Green's presentation today?
Well, apart from Minister Green, in terms of the entire panel, we had Patricia Francis, who says that the region needs regulatory harmonization, and a short list of high impact, viable projects that attract private investment. We also heard from the Caribbean export, and they spoke about the biggest hurdle being scale. We are small, so we need to work together. He spoke about Antigua and maybe Trinidad, a company working together, being able to export.
Right.
Of course. And so we also had from the European Commission, who went to the origins, as you said, about the EPA. I know that trade is growing with recent surges, largely by Guyana, but of course, as we've seen, that it is not always equal in terms of the Caribbean. But if we look at Minister Green's, what I would call a blunt assessment, he said the promise is largely unfulfilled. All right? And he gave us stats, as we said, speaking about US $60,000 by early 2023, and just over $124,000 US dollars in 2024. If you compare that now to what the trade,
those are start figures,
and if you compare to the trade in those within that same period, it's like 17.5 billion euro trade between the Caribbean and Europe. So it's a serious trade deficit there.
And of course, he mentioned that that's mainly because the Antigua Barbuda's main sectors that it would export with services and not goods, and the EPA really is about goods. So that becomes the challenge, and that's why he wants a rework of the EPA to ensure that there can be these services. You heard from Patricia Francis, who has been a veteran pretty much of this trade facilitation, this trade framework. She actually ran JAMPRA in Jamaica, the Jamaica Promotions Agency, talking about the fact that how do you capture digital services, how do you capture branding, how do you capture, for example, the brand of a country in the Caribbean, for example. She talked about Jamaica's example. We're going to be getting a quick word as well from Senator Jonathan Joseph as well. We're going to be hoping that he can join us in a short while. He's also here taking in what's taking place here. We're also expecting in a short while, at 5 o'clock, so just under half an hour time, we're expecting the Women's Forum to start, and that of course will be keenly looked forward to. For example, I'm seeing to the right of us Alexandrina Wong. We'll also try to get a quick comment from her as well in relation to what she's expecting from the event. Other individuals who are expecting to take part in the Women's Forum are already here and waiting with bated breath in relation to that. But in terms of additional points that Minister Green made, for example, he called for a recalibration or reset of this EPA. And again, this joint parliamentary assembly of the EU and Caribbean lawmakers is looking to actionable, definable, tangible quantifiable measures, Jamie, coming out of this. Not just talk, not just essentially coming up and having a talk shop.
Let's hope
not. That's really the aim of it. And so that's what we'll be looking forward to in relation to this. So here's where the rubber really hits the road. Countries of the Caribbean, differently set up in terms of their economic structures. Antigua Barbuda mainly services other countries in the region, mainly, or more goods than services, or perhaps a bit of a 50-50 in terms of that split, looking to see how best they can extract as much as possible out of these stocks, so that they do not become the stocks, but with quantifiable action as well. If you're just joining us, you're wondering what's taking place here at the AUA. We're at the American University of Antigua, the conference center, the same conference center that hosted SIDS, the same conference center that hosted the OAS General Assembly last year. Of course, SIDS 4 was in 2024. The OAS General Assembly was last year. The CTM was last year, and it will also be held this year as well. And the same conference center, which will hold the Commonwealth Heads of Government meeting in November of this year, the 1st to the 4th of November. So that's the same conference center where we're at. And that conference center is hosting the first plenary session of the Caribbean EU Parliamentary Assembly. So what that is, I mean, what pretty much, how does the rubber hit the road in relation to that? That's lawmakers from the Caribbean and the European Union. And when we say the Caribbean, we're not always talking about CARICOM. We're really talking about CARIFORUM. So CARICOM plus the Dominican Republic. That's what we're talking about in relation to the engagement between that bloc within the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States, or the OACPS, as well as the European Union. There are, of course, 3 major blocks within this OACPS, Jamie. There would, of course, be the African, Caribbean and Pacific States. Quite a lot of countries, dozens of countries actually, between Africa, the Caribbean and Pacific. They're all linked together by the fact that they're all in the same boat. They're all developing countries, all countries of the global south. So here is an opportunity for the OACPS to provide a platform and a forum and literally an arena for these countries to engage in discussions on the issues that are of common interest and concern to them. So it's a fantastic opportunity for them to engage and to look at the fact that they're all having some of the same common challenges, common issues, common potential, common opportunities as well, because it's not only challenges as well.
Yeah, I mean, some other quotes from Minister Green. He said that market access exists, but for many small businesses, the benefits are still theoretical. Right.
Yes.
And he also, well, as I said, he said we can't run a Formula 1 race on a bicycle. It's interesting.
That's extraordinary. That's the imagery of that. That's a metaphor of that. It's extraordinarily striking in relation to the asymmetry that he was talking about. I suppose that's why he's saying that there needs to be this recalibration.
Right. And he said that the agreement needs, as you said, a reset. And the 2020 review, he said, must bring balance.
Yes, absolutely. So we're going to be talking to 2 members of the team shortly. We're going to be talking to 2 members of Parliament here. Not members of Parliament, 2 members of the Parliament, but they are senators. We're going to be talking with the Senate President, Lindsey Williams-Grant. She's actually engaged in some discussions now. We're also hoping to speak with Senator Jonathan Joseph, who's an opposition senator as well. He's been here for most of the proceedings today, so we're expecting to hear from them in a short while. We'll also expect to hear from Alexandrina Wong. I'm looking for Alexandrina. I think she might have just stepped away to our right here. In fact, I actually think she's gone a little bit farther. So, Jamie, as you continue to give us a little bit more quotes from Minister Green, I'm going to swing over and get Alexandrina to join us to look at some of the key points that she's expecting to raise and have raised in the Women's Forum, which is coming up in a short while. So we're going to be talking with Alexandrina Wong in a short while in relation to. So Alexandrina Wong, we're going to be getting yes, indeed, yes, absolutely. So our de facto producer for the day is getting Alexandrina to speak with us in relation to what she's expecting from the Women's Forum. So in addition to the Women's Forum, which is coming up at 5 o'clock, Jamie, there will be tomorrow, also at 5, the Youth Forum. So the issue of youth and women, critically important as well. So we're expecting very, very useful discussions on those forums. What we're expecting as well is, as we wait to hear from Alexandrina to join us, right, we're going to be going over to her in a short while, but what we're also expecting, yes. So we actually yes. So we actually go over to speak with Alexandrina as well to get some perspectives from her in terms of what she's expecting from this Women's Forum that's coming up as well. Of course, if you're just joining us, continued coverage right here on ABS on all our platforms. And we're going to be speaking now with the founder of Women Against Rape, that's Alexandrina Wong. So Alexandrina, if you could actually turn a little bit to our cameras. So our camera is right there, a broadcast position. I think that might be a little bit of a challenge if you stand. You prefer to stand or you want to sit? Okay, no problem at all. Just tell me, thanks so much for joining us for a broadcast. What are you expecting? You're here for the Women's Forum starting in a short while. What are you expecting to hear from that? Or what are the main issues you'd want to have raised in that?
Okay, as part of the theme for this year's program, it focuses a lot on relationships. It also looks at how women network with each other locally and internationally that can help to empower women, especially financial empowerment and political empowerment. So I'm very, very much interested to hear what the panelists would have to say, and also how in the Commonwealth, what is being done to really look at violence against women and girls.
Yes. Are those, in your view, the biggest challenges facing Antigua Barbuda per se at this point in the Caribbean?
The entire world, the Commonwealth, of which we are a part. We recently had a book and report launch looking at climate change and exploitation. So those are very, very critical areas looking at the livelihoods of women across the Commonwealth. And my organization, sincerely hopes that coming out of these this Women's Forum meeting, that there will be stronger ties among women, that the gaps that look at things like quota and so on will be discussed and taken forward.
So that it doesn't become a talking shop. A final question, Alexandrina, because sometimes we have these four and they end up like talking shops, and they're not clear, definitive, tangible action points coming out of them. What would you want to be those actionable items that can be followed up on from this Women's Forum?
Okay, well, this year, Women Against Rape has chosen peace, justice, and strong institutions. So we want to look at policies. We want to look at the gaps in our policies. We would want also to strengthen those policies that are already there and see how they can enhance the advancement and the status of women and families in Antigua and Barbuda and the Commonwealth as a whole.
Alexandrina, thank you so much for the tremendous work that you've been doing. You've been a tireless advocate on this issue. We thank you so much. And we hope that the discussions which will take place in a short while will turn out to be effective and that there will be quantifiable measures to be checked on from this.
Thank you. Thank you very much.
Really appreciate it. Thanks so much. Alexandrina Wong, who is, of course, and we're going to be talking to Senate President Lindsey Williams-Grant in a short while. Just a very short. one. Alexandrina Alexandrina Wong just spoke with us. We're looking to get a very, very quick word from the Senate President, but she's actually having some discussions, Jamie, in terms of having a few discussions with other members of the panel here. What are the experts who spoke a bit early on? We're going to be trying to get a quick word from the Senate President. It won't be long, Senate President. I know that. Yes. Very short.
Hello,
very short. How are you doing? Good to see you, Senate President Lindsey Williams-Grant. Your take on what has happened so far, the discussions, and of course, as we get ready for the Women's Forum.
Well, I'm very excited about the Women's Forum. As you know, that is a passion of mine, the empowerment of women. And in the talks about trade and building relationships, we can't forget the important role that women play in building our economies. And so I am very excited to be here this afternoon. The morning session was, I only participated in the session with the Prime Minister's presentation, and a lot of what he said resonated. The importance of building that connection and resolving issues amicably and through partnership. And of course, I believe the sessions following were featured heavily on how they can strengthen the relationships to assist us in terms of climate. And I came in at the back end of the trade discussion, and very important topics for us to take on board as well. Looking forward to all the positive things that will come out of this discussion with the EU parliaments and the countries in that region, and how we can benefit and grow and develop our countries, particularly as it relates to strengthening the role that women play in our economies.
Absolutely. A final comment, because I know that you're having crucial discussions, good discussions with other members of the team here. What would you want to see actionable and tangible and definitive coming out of this discussion, so that they're not just a talk shop?
Very good question. Thank you very much, because that is one of my concerns when we come to these forums. Talk shop is not the best solution. For me, funding for women and more opportunities, particularly as it relates to engaging in political participation and the electoral process. I want to see that women have that gap plugged when it comes to financing their political campaigns and their interest in politics. So I'm very hopeful that that would be foremost in the resolutions coming out, even after the Women's Forum, I'm sure.
Yes, absolutely. Senate President, thank you so much for giving us a quick comment, a quick perspective. I know that you would have opted perhaps not to have spoken with us today, but thank you so much for sharing.
But I enjoy your company so much I couldn't resist.
You couldn't resist. It was
Yes.
irresistible.
It's a pleasure. It's a pleasure.
Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Thanks very much. That's Senate President Alicia Williams-Grant speaking with us there, Jamie. But as we're looking to probably also get a quick comment as well from another member of the team here. In fact, I'm seeing another senator who was an independent senator up to a few months ago, and then of course she's now an ABLP, a government senator. That's Senator Kis Johnson, who is the ABLP caretaker for St. Philip's South. So we expect to speak with her. Perhaps she's a little bit engaged at this point. She's also getting ready for the Women's Forum as well. So if you're just joining us, Jamie, it's just about 10 minutes now away from that.
Yeah, but
it should start at 5, so we're looking at 4:50.
Yeah, so 11 minutes.
11 minutes, okay, away from that one. We're trying to get a quick comment from Senator Kis Johnson just before we get ready to throw over to the Women's Forum. We'll be, of course, giving you continued live coverage here on all our platforms. If you're just joining us, thank you so much for joining us. Myself, Garfield Burford, with me is Jamie J. Roche, and we're looking at the discussions which have taken place in the afternoon session from this first ever session. It's the first ever plenary of the, and in fact we're going to be getting Senator Kis Johnson. She's saying not quite yet. We're hoping that we can speak with her a bit later on. She just came in, so we're hoping that we can get her quick comments as well. But this is the first plenary session of the Caribbean EU Parliamentary Assembly, and of course it is presenting an opportunity for lawmakers from the Caribbean and the European Union as part of the OACPS. The Caribbean, one of the 3 blocks within the Organization of African, Caribbean and Pacific States. We're hoping that, as I said, we can at some point get a very quick comment from Senator Johnson, but I think she's taking her seat at this point. We should be able to get a quick comment from her before we go to the Women's Forum. But here are some of the key issues, Jamie, that we expect to be discussed for the remainder of this. Of course, the lawmakers from the European Union and the Caribbean are expected to discuss key issues including climate resilience and energy transition. Those issues were discussed this morning. Trade and investment, transnational organized crime, territorial integrity and multilateralism, and the situation in Haiti. The situation in Haiti, as you heard from Minister Chet Green earlier, expected to dominate the discussions on Wednesday, and that is a very fraught situation that hopefully there can be some progress in relation to addressing it.
Yeah, certainly. And as we move some 9 minutes to the Women's Forum, even in the trade discussion, we had a representative from UN Women who did speak about gender issues, spoke about gender equality being not shouldn't be peripheral to trade and investment, because it's central to growth. Everything affects women, everything affects men. You got to zero in, and she knows that women own some 40% or more of MSMEs in many Caribbean countries and dominate key sectors like tourism and so forth. But women-owned businesses, she says, structurally are underfinanced and underconnected, and says that women-led firms receive less financing. And so we see the reason why there's a Women Forum here in terms of this big discussion with the EU and the Caribbean Forum.
Absolutely. And of course, the Women's Forum looking at women as change makers in economy and business the youth forum to take place tomorrow will look at the empowerment of youth for climate resilience. And we're expecting, Jamie, according to the European Parliament, we're expecting that the discussions will culminate on Wednesday. Of course, it's 3 days of discussion, started today, will end on Wednesday. The session we expect to culminate with concrete recommendations to help guide future joint action between the European Parliament and, of course, the lawmakers in the Caribbean region as well. Of course, as we said, Caribbean not just confined to the CARICOM. CARICOM made up of 15 member states, 14 of them independent member states, but it's not just CARICOM, it's also CARIFORM really, which is CARICOM plus the Dominican Republic. And of course, if you see the flags behind us, the Dominican Republic flag is just beside the Dominica flag. So that explains why it's not just a CARICOM meeting with the European Parliament, it's a CARIFORM meeting. So it's a CARIFORM is that vehicle, Jamie, for example, when the EPA was signed, there's a lot of talk about CARIFORM, which is, of course, CARICOM plus the Dominican Republic, and that has always been a vehicle for ongoing engagement between the Caribbean countries of the Caribbean and also the European Union. So that has continued unabated as well in these discussions. We're also looking at the fact that here's an opportunity for more and more people within the Caribbean to understand the crucial importance of this partnership now, given the geopolitical flux that the world finds itself in, given the challenges of a changing geopolitical order and a changing geo-economic order as well, Jamie. And it is extraordinary that this is coming at a time when both lawmakers from both areas, from both the European Union and the Caribbean, or CARIFORM, are saying, look, we are committed to the principles of multilateralism. We're not eschewing, we're not casting aside multilateralism, we're not casting aside the post-World War II rules-based order that has helped us, because essentially the Caribbean has been saying that, look, without this rules-based order, they would have been even further on the fringes of global development, because this has provided them with an opportunity to have their voices heard. They don't have power, they're not even a middle power, they're an infinitesimal power in the world, militarily, geopolitically, economically. So countries of the region depend on that rules-based order for them to have a voice in the global community. Without that rules-based order, they feel even more exposed, even more vulnerable. So they want to maintain that rules-based order. And they're saying this is an opportunity to, again, put that on the table to say multilateralism must continue to be the paradigm that we operate within the context of not just South-South cooperation, but how the global South engages with countries of the global North.
And again, it can't be a talk shop. It must translate into increased exports, more investors, and down to jobs. That's what people want to hear about, Mr. B. Jobs. They want to hear about jobs. So I'm sure the youth forum that's coming up, there will be much discussion about jobs and skills. You need work-ready skills. Because you have the Harvesting Center here. I mean, mobility of talent. A lot of talented people, a lot of talented young people in Antigua and Barbuda that need to get that talent out, need to get their music out and so forth. And so, of course, they'll be looking at entrepreneurship. That's a pathway that can get you out, and digital trade is very important.
We have to get a comment from Paula CM as well. Yes. Paula CM is here for the Women's Forum, which starts in a short while. Yes. You're always ready for television, Paula. Don't worry. The Women's Forum, the camera's right there. Yes, and of course we're in live. You're always ready for the camera. Yes. You're always ready for the camera, Paula CM. Yes, indeed. Your take on what are you expecting to hear from the Women's Forum? It starts in a few minutes' time.
Well, actually, I learned that all the powerful women in the world will be here. And given that my dreams and aspirations are to, be within that core group, I decided to come here today to learn from these ladies, and also if there's an opportunity for me to exchange rich ideas from Antigua and Barbuda. I've worked in several sectors and industry. At this moment, I'm working in academia, so I would love to hear the thoughts on academia and other insightful information that can help me to grow and to participate in the global conversation with regard to those issues that impact women both positively and negatively.
Absolutely, absolutely for that. A final point, what are some of the actionable items? What are some of the things that you'd want, concrete things that you'd want to see come out of this Women's Forum? Not just a talk shop, not just putting these issues on the table. What would you want to see come out of it that are going to redound to the benefit of women in this country and across the Caribbean and across the European Union?
So I have noticed that in the United Nations, it's generally stated that they're seeking to have more inclusion from Black Caribbean women. And I do believe that sometimes it's a talk shop because there are so many Black Caribbean women who are fit for purpose, and yet we are still in the minority in these organizations. Another major factor that I would like to hear being addressed here today is that of equal pay for your qualifications. Again, I've worked in several industries, and the males seem to be paid a higher salary than the females, even when the females are more qualified than the males. And I think that is really a terrible thing that continues to happen even into the 21st century. I think it's time for change, time for a revolution, because when you look at the output from universities across the globe, more females are graduating at higher levels than males. And then my last point, I'll keep it to 3. I do believe that in this AI and advancing technological age, that more females should be motivated, encouraged to participate in that industry, because we talk about STEM and STEAM and everything else, and girls are still, it seems as if girls are still disenfranchised in this particular area. So I would like to hear more conversation, more actionable items about these particular areas. I have several more, but I'll keep it to 3 because as a global leader, yes, I understand that brevity is important.
Yes, brevity is the soul of wit, and you're always an example of that.
I try my best to abide by the rules and to be proper in all circumstances.
Really appreciate it, Paula Siemley, Executive Director of the Lifelong Learning Unit at the University of the West Indies 5 Islands campus. Thank you so much for giving us your impromptu comments. Those were very, very, insightful. Really appreciate it.
The Lord says that ask Him for wisdom, ask Him for understanding, and He'll give it unto us liberally. And I do believe at the end of all this that my comments will be remembered.
Always. Thank you so much. Really appreciate it. Paula Siemley there speaking with us about what she expects in terms of concrete measures, concrete initiatives, concrete actionable items from this Women's Forum. And that has always been the challenge. How do you make sure that you can monitor, you can track, you can trace what comes out of these discussions, these 4 as well, right?
Yeah.
We're getting ready. In fact, the panelists have already started to assemble for the Women's Forum, so we're going to be throwing over to there shortly. But let's just give very quickly, Jamie, a kind of timeline of the development. That's okay. A kind of timeline of developments which have happened over the past 50 years, because we're looking at 51 years now. It's since 1975 that organization of the ACP group was formed based on this Georgetown Agreement, right? So it's been about 51 years since that. And in terms of the timeline, so the founding text of the ACP group at the time, not the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States, but the ACP group, that's how it started, 1975 with the Georgetown Agreement. Then there was an amendment to the Georgetown Agreement in 1992. And also in 2003, so amendments came. Just as how the Treaty of Chaguaramas was signed, paving the way for CARICOM, it was then revised, the revised Treaty of Chaguaramas to pave the way for the CSMA. That also happened. Then we had, in 2019, another revision to the Georgetown Agreement. This was in Nairobi on the 7th of December 2019, and this paved the way for the ACP group becoming the Organization of African, Caribbean, Pacific States, or the OACPS. So it no longer was known as the ACP group. or as the ACP, it was now the Organization of African, Caribbean, and Pacific States.
What changed?
It became, it morphed into, it had more structure, it had more structure, and of course a new name. They say what's in a name, it had more structure, and of course then we had the Cotonou Agreement in 2000, and then the Samoa Agreement in 2023, and this is the first plenary of the Caribbean and EU Parliament since the Samoa Agreement. We're almost at a time, Jamie, when we'll be handing over to the stage for the start of the Women's Forum. So far we should commend the organizers because they have been on time the entire day today. When they say they're starting at 4:30, they start at 4:30. So let's see. Jimmy, your final comments before we go over.
Well, of course, the message for today's discussion, the EU-Caribbean partnership has strong tools, at least on paper. You have the EPA. Also, the Global Gateway, that's a $300 billion strategy. Just 300 billion euros. And, well, that was the initial plan from 2021 to 2027. But last year, they were able to get to 306 billion ahead of time. So now the target is 400 billion. And of course, linking that with the EPA, carbon leaders are calling now as we've seen for a reset to ensure that carbon countries fully benefit from this. And of course, as the focus now shifts to the Women Forum and the Youth Forum and so forth, the question is whether those promises can finally be translated into opportunities that people can actually feel.
And that's what this forum is about. Let's see whether or not at the end of it on Wednesday there will be, as promised, these concrete deliverables that can be tracked and traced, and also the joint action that can be facilitated as well. All right, pretty much we'll be now heading over to the start of the proceedings. Of course, this is the Women's Forum, one of two key fora taking place today. The Women's Forum tomorrow is the Youth Forum. A 5 p.m. start. We're pretty much just at about that. And of course, this is part one of the four that is being held under the first plenary session of the Caribbean EU Parliamentary Assembly. Lawmakers gathered here from Europe, the European Parliament, and also from CARIFORUM countries. All right. So, by the way, on the panel, I'm seeing Senator Kiz Johnson, who's representing Antigua Barbuda, and of course, there is there's a Bahamian parliamentarian as well. In fact, I'll just tell you very, very quickly, the parliamentarian from the Bahamas. He spoke earlier, for example, in that discussion about trade. Griffin Barry, a senator from the Bahamas, he's also part of the discussions as well. So, Senator Kiz Johnson, about to start. Let's go back over to the stage for continuing coverage of the assembly here. This is the Women's Forum. Senator Kiz Johnson will get us started. Let's go back to the stage.
Honorable co-chairs, excellencies, distinguished guests, good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
It is my distinct pleasure to bring remarks on this auspicious occasion of the Caribbean EU Parliamentary Assembly Women's Forum. The government of Antigua and Barbuda fully recognizes and appreciates the importance of proactively promoting gender equality and the empowerment of women and girls, and we have consistently sought to enact policy, legislation, and programming geared towards this. We continue to be guided by the international gender equality and human rights conventions, such as the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, in which we submitted our most recent report in 2024, the Convention to End All Forms of Violence and Discrimination Against Women and Girls. This is indicative of our commitment and dedication to transparency, as well as understanding the need for monitoring and evaluation as the critical needs of women and girls continue to evolve. The theme for this forum is Women as Change Makers in Economy and Business. This is a very relevant theme, audience, because as women, we are the backbone of our economy in many ways. Across the Caribbean region, women, we aren't just passive participants in economic life. We are drivers of growth, architects of resilience, and powerful agents of change. We are the market vendors who keep local agriculture alive. We are the entrepreneurs who transform small ideas into thriving businesses. We are the professionals leading in banking, tourism, education, health, and public service. We are the innovators, building digital brands and expanding Caribbean products to global markets. These examples illustrate the multifaceted and indispensable role that we as women play within our respective economies and the inherent capacity they possess. In Antigua and Barbuda, our remarkable twin island state, there is tangible evidence of meaningful effort by our government to continue to catalyze women's role and stature within our national economic framework. Examples of this are the Prime Minister's Entrepreneurial Development Fund, a flagship government initiative aimed at supporting micro, small, and medium businesses for the creation and growth in Antigua and Barbuda. It provides low-cost financing, training, and business to support entrepreneurs, including women and youth. We also have the Antigua and Barbuda Investment Authority that plays a key role in supporting business development and investment by building capacity of small and medium-sized enterprise owners through training and technical guidance. Furthermore, in Antigua and Barbuda, we have seen women dominate within our tertiary level educational landscape, which bodes well for their economic and earning prospects. Our University of the West Indies Five Islands campus has statistics indicating that in 2025, females make up as much as 75% of total student enrollment. It is noteworthy that this is also made possible by the government of Antigua and Barbuda supporting access to higher level education through scholarships emanating from the Prime Minister's Scholarship Program, as well as the Board of Education Scholarship Program, which countless women have been able to benefit from and subsequently complete their studies and enter into the workforce qualified and confident. As this forum examines and delves into women's roles within our economies and within our businesses, I implore us all to think critically of practical and transformative policies, initiatives, and ideas that we can use as governments, as civil society, and as financial institutions to foster a macroeconomic environment that is conducive to women being able not only to participate actively, but to thrive and transcend barriers and the proverbial glass ceiling. The government of Antigua and Barbuda proudly remains committed to advancing gender equality and ensuring that we continue to create policies, programs, and mechanisms that will ensure we have national development that is inclusive and gender responsive. Thank you.
Thank you. Member of Senate Keith Johnson, honorable colleagues, esteemed guests, and fellow citizens. First, I would like to inform you about the language regime for our forum. You may speak and listen in English, French, and Spanish. And in addition, you can speak in Polish, but there is no interpretation into these languages. So, dear friends, my warmest welcome to the first edition of Women's Forum, taking place as part of the first Caribbean EU Parliamentary Assembly since signing of the Samoa Agreement. My name is Anna-Maja Henriksson. I'm a member of the European Parliament. I come from Finland, where we right now have about -10 degrees. I represent the Renew Europe group in the European Parliament, and together with my colleague, Honourable Barry Griffin, Vice President of the Senate of the Bahamas, we will co-chair this meeting. But before we start, let me thank you, Member of the Senate, Kis Johnson, for hosting our meeting and for the opportunity to discuss women's empowerment under the new Caribbean EU partnership. And thank you for a very inspiring speech, and congratulations to all the efforts and achievements that you have done here in Antigua. Let me also thank all of you for presence at this forum, and also every man in this room. Thank you for being here. I'm looking forward to an inspiring and lively discussion here this evening, and it's a great honor for me to co-chair the Caribbean EU Women's Forum dedicated to the topic of women as change makers in economy and business. Women's economic empowerment is a top priority in Caribbean and European countries. We can be proud of that. It's a key driver for sustainable development under the Caribbean EU Economic and Trade Partnership Agreement. Women must be viewed just as men are, as economic actors as well as agents of change. It's also a topic particularly close to my heart. I have been focusing heavily on gender equality and women's rights during my political life, launching actions to address violence against women and promoting women's leadership and representation in politics, for example, when I was serving as a Minister of Justice in my home country. But at the EU level, it's also timely relevant. The new Gender Equality Strategy 2026-2030 will outline the concrete measures that the European Commission intends to carry out over the next 5 years to advance gender equality in Europe. Women are now present in all spheres of society, from education to employment, reaching political and business decision making. But, however, despite this optimistic picture, equality between women and men is far from being a reality. In all areas of society and life, women still face discrimination, inequality, violence, and insecurity. As parliamentarians, it's our responsibility to bring women's voices to the political debates and to raise women's concerns. I think that we know what we are talking about. And we want to make the Caribbean EU partnership more responsive and inclusive, and we want to create solutions within a legislative context. While our invited speakers are all women, we also want to engage with men as a part of the solution, because we can't get any solution without the men. So we need to join our voices and we need to work in a collaborative manner because the participation and leadership of women is essential for democracy, justice, peace, security, prosperity, and for a greener planet. And it's my belief that the new Caribbean-EU partnership offers a unique platform for European and Caribbean lawmakers to meet and set the tone for future cooperation and joint action, enabling us to respond more efficiently to realities on the ground. As a first concrete action, I would like to announce that the outcome of our discussion will be reflected in a draft proposal for recommendation to be addressed to the Caribbean EU Council of Ministers, focusing on accelerating women's empowerment, promoting a gender-equal world, and integrating a feminist approach into our partnership. But now, allow me to welcome our distinguished guest speakers. Keynote speaker, Mrs. Isuva Yahen from Barbados, is Deputy Representative and the Head of Office for the UN Women Multi-Country Office for the Caribbean. And then we will have some idea sharing. Honorable Alicia Williams-Grant is the President of the Senate and representative of the Antigua and Barbuda Network of Women Parliamentarians. We will have approximately 1 hour and a half for the whole discussion here today, and this exchange will also require from you that you will have the possibility to a lively exchange, but I would like to ask you then to identify yourself, be brief, and if you have a question, please indicate to whom it is addressed. So we first have the key speaker, and then we have the intervention by Miss Valley Williams-Grant, and then after that we will have time for questions and answers. So before I now pass the floor to our guests, let me give the floor to my co-chair, Honorable Barry Griffin from the Bahamas, for his welcoming remarks. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Madam Co-Chair.
Yes.
It is a pleasure to join you this evening and co-chair this Women's Forum at a particularly important moment for Caribbean-EU partnership. Across the Caribbean, women are already driving economic activity, sustaining communities, and leading innovation, often while facing persistent barriers to access to finance, markets, and decision-making spaces. From micro-entrepreneurs and small business owners to leaders in politics, media, and civil society, Caribbean women are central actors in our economies and agents of change. At the same time, significant challenges remain. Women across the region continue to experience unequal access to credit, lower earnings, and greater exposure to economic shocks, especially in small island developing states. Addressing these gaps is not only a matter of equality, but a necessity for sustainable and inclusive growth in the Caribbean. At the regional level, these challenges have been acknowledged within the CARICOM framework, including through decisions and communiques of heads of government that recognize the importance of advancing gender equality and women's participation in economic life as a part of the region's broader development and resilience agenda. In recent years, countries in our region have taken concrete steps to support women's economic empowerment, including initiatives to strengthen women-led enterprises, expand access to financing, and promote entrepreneurship. In the Bahamas, for example, national initiatives have focused on strengthening women's entrepreneurship and economic participation, including support for women-owned micro, small, and medium-sized enterprises, improved access to finance, and skills development. Efforts aim at supporting women-led businesses, particularly in the context of economic recovery and resilience building, illustrate how women's economic empowerment is being advanced as a development priority. These experiences highlight the importance of regional cooperation and partnership. The challenges faced by women entrepreneurs across the Caribbean are shared, and so too must be the solutions. This forum provides a valuable space to exchange experiences, identify effective approaches, and shape recommendations that reflect the realities faced by women across our region. As parliamentarians, we have a responsibility to ensure that women's economic empowerment is translated into concrete policies, legislation, and investment priorities. The Caribbean-EU partnership offers an important platform to advance this work in a coordinated and practical manner, grounded in shared values and mutual interests. Now, it's my great pleasure to give the floor to our keynote speaker, Ms. Ueshwa Iyahin. Ms. Iyahin, you have the floor for 10 minutes. Please welcome her as she comes to the podium.
Oops. Maybe I should have stayed there. I hope I can be heard.
Let's give her another round of applause.
And I hope my journey up here didn't take 10 minutes, Mr. Chair. Okay. What should I say? Can I reclaim my time?
Yes, reclaiming your time.
Yes. Honorable co-chairs, excellencies, distinguished delegates, I bring you warm greetings on behalf of Ms. Bibiana Aido Almagro, UN Women's Regional Director for the Americas and the Caribbean, who regrettably was unable to attend this forum. It is an honor to have been invited to address you today. Our region is not immune to the growing geopolitical tensions and uncertainty that resound the world over. And the foresight to host this first inaugural Caribbean EU Parliamentary Assembly speaks to the valuable partnership that exists between the EU and the Caribbean region, as well as a recognition that such a partnership is significant for addressing the critical issues of mutual concern. And this forum is a recognition of an understanding that there are many issues which continue to face SIDS, and it also is a recognition of the immense contribution and partnership between UN Women and the European Union. We have worked closely together as a UN system in the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative, which has lended invaluable support to our collective efforts to address the scourge of gender-based violence. And as articulated in the 4th International Conference on SIDS, the Abbas, gender equality is a development priority for SIDS and for the region. The Abbas outlined a comprehensive framework for sustainable development and resilience building and social equality. But preceding the SIDS Forum, UN Women, in collaboration with the Caribbean Development Bank and other valued partners, hosted the Gender Equality Forum right here in Antigua and Barbuda, which convened stakeholders from across all SIDS regions, including development partners such as the EU, to identify and articulate gender-related issues and concerns that will be able to be addressed and to foster continued progress and resilience for SIDS. And these gender equality priorities included the need to accelerate women's economic empowerment and to eradicate gender-based violence and to close gender gaps that results from trade and climate change and disaster impacts. All of these featured highly on the agenda. And in September 2025, we marked the 30th anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action, and recommitted as member states of the UN, and all EU member states, I think, are member states of the UN, recommitted to closing the remaining gaps in our fight for gender equality and women's empowerment. And so I'll just share with you briefly a few thoughts as I reclaimed my time to share with you what our thoughts are as UN Women on this very important topic, where we will highlight women's economic empowerment in the Caribbean. I will share with you the challenges from our perspective, and also, given the topic, celebrate the gains that have been made, but also identify where we can co-create solutions to the problems that we are experiencing now in relation to women's economic empowerment. So I cannot see, okay, I think I see the slides here. So if we can proceed to the first slide. Okay. So as I mentioned, the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action is considered the most progressive blueprint for advancing women's rights, including their economic rights. It includes 205 priority actions, and Antigua and Barbuda was the first country in the region to submit their Beijing report. And 2025, the anniversary of the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action in 2025, there were paper series issued with words to action that included practical guidance to member states on how to address the challenges as it relates to gender equality and women's empowerment. And our strategic plan, if we can go to the next slide, also highlights the priority focus that we place as UN Women on women's economic empowerment in resilient economies. In our new strategic plan, you will see that climate is integrated into our proposed interventions on women's economic empowerment. Women's leadership and decision-making features as a priority as well, and all of these are interlinked. And women and girls free from violence, that's another outcome, and women, peace and security, and humanitarian action. So these four areas are all interlinked. We can't have a peaceful and safe and secure Caribbean without there being women having an equal voice in leadership and in policy making, and without the women and girls experiencing lives free from violence. Next slide, please. And the next slide, I think we'll skip over this one. So women are central actors in the economy. In many countries, they own 40% or more, as I shared earlier today, of micro, small, and medium enterprises. But their economic participation is further constrained by social and protection factors. Women in the Caribbean perform 2 to 3 times more unpaid care work than men, reducing the time and resources available for business development and labor market engagement. At the same time, gender-based violence carries a heavy macroeconomic cost. In a study that UN Women, multi-country study that UN Women MCO Caribbean conducted with support from the European Union as a partner in the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative. In Jamaica alone, a national study estimated the economic costs of violence against women at 6.5% of GDP. In Grenada, that cost was 5.2% of Grenada's GDP. This represents the cost of inaction. And imagine if, instead of having 5.24% of Grenada's GDP, or 6.5% of Jamaica's GDP, that there was investment in breaking down the barriers to women's participation in the economy. And the evidence therefore shows that women entrepreneurs are not excluded from economic life. They are active, as we've heard today, but they are marginalized. They are highly educated, as we heard today. 70%, if I recall correctly, of the students at the university here, but their potential is not being unlocked to the extent required to have them take advantage of investment instruments, stronger and enabling environmental measures to address the barriers to their participation in the economy in the first place, caring for elderly parents, caring for children. This issue of unpaid care and domestic work is a global issue that must be addressed. Financial inclusion and safety. I just shared with you the statistics on the economic costs of violence against women and girls. Advancing women's economic empowerment is therefore not only a social priority, it is a prerequisite for productivity and resilience and sustainable growth in the Caribbean. And what I would like to share, because I have to admit I can't really see the PowerPoint, but I have notes. So I'll rely on my notes instead of pretending to see the slides from here. Is that climate change and women's small businesses in the Caribbean is also the intersections of these we have to address. Women own many small businesses in the Caribbean. As I mentioned earlier in the session today, they are overrepresented in the informal economy. They operate in climate-exposed sectors such as tourism, retail, food services, hospitality, and beauty care, making them more likely to remain closed for longer periods after disasters. How are we, in our resilience strategies, addressing these gender gaps in practical terms, so that when the financing that is expected after a disaster, we saw the benefit of Jamaica investing in climate bonds, and so when those bonds are issued after a disaster impact, what percentage of that goes to women-led enterprises to enable them to accelerate their recovery to be able to participate in the economy after the impact of a disaster? Are these instruments indexed, gender indicators, in these climate bonds that increasingly our member states are adopting as part of, and as they should, their resilience strategies to the impact of disasters? This is where I know that the EU's leadership becomes critical, and in partnership with other development partners, we would like to see these instruments become even more gender responsive in a way that would ensure that climate shocks, which intensify protection risks, are mitigated when we have these instruments developed in a way that takes into account these pre-existing inequalities. And so I know my time is limited. I will wrap up very soon. I know, sorry. What are we doing as a UN system? Through several joint programs, most of UN Women's programs are joint. I will give some examples. The SDG joint program being implemented here in in Antigua and Barbuda and St. Lucia, in 2 countries. UN Women has supported trainings and other capacity strengthening initiatives for both women entrepreneurs and financial institutions in order to bridge the existing financial inclusion gaps. Through the Build Back Equal project, funded by Global Affairs Canada, and which we are jointly leading and implementing with UNFPA, we are analyzing gender gaps in social protection systems in order to ensure that their capacity is strengthened to design laws, policies, including family-friendly policies, policies on parental and paternity leave. I wish many of the men had remained here in the room, because one of the things we're going to do in BBE is to estimate as a percentage of the budget what it would cost, or what would be the benefits to the economy for investing in the care economy, in parental leave, in extended maternity leave, in carers leave. We have a demographic transition with aging people. What would it look like in an economy in the Caribbean where we are able to invest and be able to cost and estimate the investment room for all of these programs and measures to be able to build a caring society. Because if we don't, we know what the economic cost of that would be. It would be the status quo, it would be exposure to risk, it would be expanded or increased inequality gaps, and you know where that will lead us. I mentioned the EU-UN Spotlight Initiative, where we developed Caribbean evidence-based models for social norms transformation. The study I just mentioned on the economic costs was as a result of the EU's investment in Spotlight as well. And we also continue to invest in women's leadership and in supporting financial mechanisms for gender equality, several feasibility studies that we have done, looking at the same financial instruments to see how gender responsive they are and how we can ensure that these instruments are able to be revised to make them more gender responsive. And so in closing, what I would say here in Antigua and Barbuda, the network of women parliamentarians, Senator Williams-Grant is here. I want to really commend her for her leadership, demonstrates how parliamentary collaboration can advance gender responsive policy. At the 69th session of the Commission on the Status of Women, as I mentioned, Antigua and Barbuda was the first country to showcase achievements aligned with the Beijing Declaration and Platform for Action. And I've mentioned that the EU has been a long-standing partner, and the strategic prioritization that the EU has placed on strengthening environmental sustainability and climate resilience, and ensuring that that just transition to a sustainable and diversified economy that supports decent jobs and growth and promotes trade and investment and enhances good governance. These are all ingredients for, a recipe for a society that I think we want to live in, inclusive and secure societies where institutions are accountable and where no one is left behind. So I want to end by saying that women are not a vulnerable group. They are economic multipliers. We are not actually taking advantage as a region of the significant investment that we have made as a Caribbean people. Women who are highly educated, closing gender gaps when compared to other regions. Now it is what is the formula we need to accelerate our development. And so gender equality is not charity, it is a fundamental human right. It is a foundational strategy. It is an essential driver for sustainable development. It is a driver of economic growth and peaceful societies. And our future competitiveness depends on unlocking this potential, from the rural agro-processors to the tech entrepreneurs, from creative exporters to climate innovators, because when women shape economies, economies grow stronger. We appreciate and value the presence and investment of the EU in the continued sustainable development of the region, and as our valued partner, we trust that the EU will continue to work alongside us to ensure that no one is left behind in the Caribbean. I thank you. Can I reclaim
Thank you so much.
Walking the back down the stairs, down the steps. Can I reclaim my time and continue?
No more time. But thank you so much, Ms. Yahan, for setting the scene for today's debate. I will now invite the Honorable Alincia Williams-Grant, President of the Senate, to now come and share her ideas with us. Please welcome her, as she is already now at the podium.
Thank you very much. I'm hoping everyone is hearing me.
Yes.
Good, very good, because this is an important message. And I'm hoping that those who stayed and are with us will be able to take the message to their colleagues who left. When I came in, I was very excited to see the numbers, but enough has been said about that. Good afternoon, everyone. Honorable co-chairs, honorable delegates, excellencies, friends, guests, colleagues and partners, good afternoon again. When we speak about investments, trade agreements, and global gateways, all the nice things that you've had the discussion on this morning, we often focus on infrastructure, markets, and regulatory frameworks. But I want to invite us, as we deliberate on the economic and trade partnership agreement between our jurisdictions and the opportunities that this presents, I want us to consider one of the most under-leveraged and underfunded investment drivers of sustainable growth within our economies: women. I call it unlocking the woman factor. It's not a societal nicety, it's an economic strategy. And if we're serious about achieving the Sustainable Development Goals and the goals I heard from Honorable Co-Chair about that the EU has established, if we are serious about building resilient Caribbean economies under this framework, then women must be at the center of that investment strategy. And we must find mechanisms to realize that untapped economic potential. Now, we all know the Sustainable Development Goals, and those recognize what empirical evidence has always established. Women in decision-making improve governance outcomes. Women entrepreneurs reinvest more in families and communities, the bedrock of our societies. And gender parity accelerates, my good sister just said that, accelerates economic growth and resilience. And if we accept all of this, because I'm sure all of us are convicted here, present now, then we must ask the question, why then is the World Economic Forum in its recent global gender gap report telling us that it's going to take 123 years to reach gender parity? You should be outraged. You should be disappointed, because it is unacceptable. The good thing is that the report also reminds us that economies that invest in their full human capital, they didn't say men, their full human capital, they didn't say women, they said full. They are more sustainable and prosperous. And I quote here, when you tap into the complete talent pool and benefit from diverse perspectives, you unlock creativity and innovation that drives real growth and productivity, end quote. The woman factor is not charity, it's economic efficiency. And in the context of the Caribbean-EU partnership, this presents both a challenge and an opportunity. If our trade and investment frameworks are to yield the fullest returns, they must deliberately, not sideline, not let me think about it after, but deliberately at the time of planning and inception, incorporate gender-responsive strategies that enable women to access capital, access markets, and access leadership pathways. Now, across the Caribbean, women, we've heard, remain underrepresented in senior financial and corporate leadership, access to large-scale capital and investment networks, and my dear, very dear to my heart, political representation and decision-making structures. And since our discussion is centered in the context of the parliamentary system, it behoves me to spend a little time on the glaring gap in our parliaments here in Antigua and Barbuda. We only have 5.8% of elected members in the House of Representatives. Now that sounds nice, but the real data is 1. 1 out of 17. Now the Senate has a better and stronger representation, 41%, that's about 7 of us, but we're all appointed. And when you ask the question, when you go out and you could try to cajole, that's the word I use, and encourage women to get involved in political life, they say many things, but one of them is that access to financial networks and capital is a major, major stumbling block and barrier. Women often lack the financial support required to scale businesses, secure loans, run for office, and sustain campaigns. And so they are excluded from participating in the electoral process. Economic exclusion becomes political exclusion, and political exclusion perpetuates economic exclusion. It's time to break the cycle. And in the context of our Caribbean cultures, our societies are shaped by a history that is race and identity driven, and so representation is powerful. Young girls must see women who look like them, speak like them, share similar beginnings, and yes, they can say, she's done it, so I can do it too. Role models are economic infrastructure. In our Young Women in Leadership program that we have at the Parliament, the leadership workshop, which we will hold this year on March 5th, will showcase successful women in finance and enterprise, women who ordinarily most don't even know about. We want to normalize ambition in the financial sector. Financial empowerment and social stability is strong and key. And I've said the research and practical examples affirm that there's direct linkage between financial empowerment and education, financial disparity and domestic violence, which remains a scourge in our society, and economic insecurity and vulnerability. But when women control resources, they have choices, they have mobility, they have bargaining power, and they have safety. Financial knowledge is not simply literacy. It's protection, it's leadership, and it's freedom. So let's move beyond the talk. Let's move beyond the SDGs. Because for me, funding must follow the rhetoric. You must invest, we must invest in women-led initiatives in the blue economy, the green economy, whatever color the economy is, they must get the support. Women entrepreneurs create jobs and they drive innovation. We've heard from the Honorable Senator. In Antigua and Barbuda, the Entrepreneurial Development Fund, as the Senator has indicated, has created access for over 47% of their clients. I'm not going to spend any time on that, but what it demonstrates is that there's not just demand. It is proof that when access is granted, women deliver. And we must scale this regionally through our Caribbean EU collaboration. And my good friend Ashua has spoken about the social protection, the mechanisms that we need to put in place. Those tray vendors that the Honorable Senator spoke about, the hair braiders, the side street beach vendors, the informal sector workers, what solutions are we offering to them with respect to insurance, health coverage, pension security? How do we monetize the unpaid home care work? And I want to stop here for a minute because I just reflected on something when I said pension security. What do we do about those women who have spent all their years caring for their family, and then when they're in their 60s, their spouse says, I'm done with this marriage? What security do we have for them? What employment mechanisms are in place? What about a pension? Investing in women must include these social protection mechanisms. Economic inclusion without safety nets is incomplete. And I want to say here that we're here talking about a lot of lofty language is being used, but there's so many that do not understand the basics of finance. Basics. And so what we've done in our parliamentary outreach programs, particularly the President's 10 and the Young Women in Leadership, and let me just say the Young Women in Leadership is designed and targeting young ladies who are 18 to 30, and the President's 10 targets girls 14 to 16. So for the President's 10 mentoring program, we've had practical lessons from bankers, how to open an account, the difference between a debit and a credit card, what a loan means, what type of investment vehicles are out there and how do they benefit you and where you want to go, how can you use those. In our Women in Leadership workshop, which we will have on the 5th of March this year, we will have a bank, again, another banking institution who's partnered with the Parliament to teach financial independence, leadership, service, and civic participation. They will be taught how to save, again, debt management, which is a critical issue for us when we're going to get loans, asset acquisition, and wealth basics. We're bringing the financial institutions into the lives of these women. We have to meet them where it matters. Financial knowledge is a leadership tool, and leadership begins early. And I won't spend any time on the fact that we now have the University of West Indies campus here in Antigua and Barbuda, because the Honorable Senator has addressed that. But that fourth landed campus is significant. It says political will must be matched with action, and it must be executed. So the talk shop is not enough. We have to take it a bit further. It signals a significant development for our region, because education is one of the most powerful tools for women's economic empowerment. And today, the Five Islands campus stands as an indicator of that, a beacon, and it's not incidental. Real progress within our educational system demands that, because it translates into economic dividends, not just for women, for all of us. When women attain higher education, they earn more, they innovate more, they're confident enough to lead more, and they invest more in their communities. I want to spend a little time to speak about the role of the NGOs and the civic organizations, because we need that partnership. There's not enough support from the corporate sector. Corporate entities tend to say, oh, I'm full, the coffers are full, we've given enough. And I said previously, did you hear me when I said, start when you're budgeting, don't wait until the end? It must be deliberate and intentional, the support for women activities and empowerment mechanisms. And so what we have in Antigua and Barbuda are shining examples like the partnership that CWIL has developed with the corporate society. Corporate society has funded the Frempreneur, it's feminine entrepreneur, a mix, Frempreneur Fund, which supports and encourages women to develop their enterprises. And they're actually provided with some funding at the end of the initiative. They also get training on marketing and other initiatives. Now, they are now proposing what they call a She Votes Her initiative, which is to create mechanisms to support women entering elective politics, especially insofar as funding sources are concerned. Now, these are simple, structured, transparent, non-partisan mechanisms which advance the development of that untapped economic potential, we women. There's no difficulty, or there should be no difficulty, in supporting them. I'll give you a living example. We had a session last week, an online session with our Young Women in Leadership program, and we needed resource personnel because we're debating on the 9th of March whether the Parliament, whether the country needs to revisit the cannabis legal framework in Antigua and Barbuda. And we leaned on CWIL to get a resource personnel from PAHO. Now, on our own, we might not have been able to tap into that resource, but because of the partnership we have, we were able to provide this educational framework for our young women. So, I'm hoping that the EU, with its more sophisticated tax structures and corporate responsibility models, can use this opportunity to share best practices on corporate social investment, tax incentives, structured gender-responsive funding, thereby incentivizing inclusive growth in our economies. The Caribbean-EU partnership is well positioned to demonstrate the inclusive economic policy that inclusive economic policy is smart economic policy. Strategic social investment strengthens labor participation and economic output. Imagine a percentage of corporate profits intentionally dedicated to business incubators, childcare and support services run by NGOs, financial literacy programming and mentoring, and leadership development pipelines. An employee who knows her child is safe at work at 7 p.m. is a more productive employee. Productivity is closely tied to security, equity, and peace of mind. The woman factor is economics, not charity. The woman factor is not peripheral to our trade and investment agenda. It is integral to its success. I want to close and remind us that in 2024, the UN Secretary General, in his International Women's Day address, reminded us that, and I quote, "Investment in women reminds us that ending the patriarchy requires money on the table, end quote. I don't need to say anything else, but I will. We must invest deliberately, not symbolically. The Caribbean-EU Economic Partnership and Global Gateway Initiative must recognize this. Infrastructure without inclusion will never deliver full returns. The greatest untapped economic resource in our region is not the offshore reserves, it is our women. If we invest strategically in access to capital, education, social protection, political participation, entrepreneurial opportunity, we will not only close the gender gap, we will strengthen our economies, we will accelerate our goals, SDGs or the European goals, and we will unlock growth. Because when women rise, economies rise. Thank you for the opportunity to share with you this afternoon.
Thank you, Madam President. I am sure you all now have some food for thought, and we're looking forward to hearing your thoughts and questions on this matter as we open the floor for participation. Madam Co-Chair.
I'm not a technical genius. Well, thank you for that inspiring speech. Now, the floor is yours. You have waited so long, but we have heard very, very nice speeches and with a lot of thoughts that I also think that have given you new thoughts. So, who will start? Please tell me your name and then if you have a specific question, who you will address it to. So, the first speaker will be my colleague from the European Parliament, Robert Biedron. The floor is yours. And it's nice to give the first possibility to speak to a man.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Co-Chair. And yeah, I'm really very happy not to be the only man in the village today. And thank you for other guys for being here, because I believe this discussion is not only about women and for women, but it's all for all of us. And it's about women, but in the broader context. And I think that there is also a role of men and boys to play in this discussion. And my question would be to our distinguished speakers, how do they imagine the role of men and boys in fighting this discrimination, inequality, since the construct of patriarchy, misogyny, is the construct which we developed for so many centuries. And now we are profiting still on that, and women and girls are paying the price on that. Wherever it is around the world, the distinguished speaker has said that we need more than 100 years to reach full equality within European Union. It's estimated we need 60 years at least if we go this pace, and it's estimated that we sooner land on Mars than we will reach full gender equality within European Union. So it pictures somehow how far we are from this. But we made progress, and I think this might be also an inspiration for us as parliamentarians from both regions, that within European Parliament we made progress. I had an honor and privilege to chair the Women's Rights and Equality Committee in previous term, and we delivered on economic inequalities a lot of legislation which tries to fill this shameful gap on gender inequality. For example, on equal pay for equal work, the directive, women had to wait for this legislation 60 years. In 1957, in Rome Treaty, we put this as one of the articles. And to put it in action, it took 60 years for European Union to make this simple change. We deliver on work-life balance legislation. We deliver on pay transparency, on women on boards, so women have also decision voice on that, but also on gender-based violence. I really appreciate the Spotlight initiative, which is a joint venture between EU and UN, but this needs to be continued. And this continuation of the Spotlight initiative will be a big loss for not only for women, but for all of us. But we need also to fight to not leave no one behind us. There is this huge problem of leaving behind women with disabilities. There is an issue of leaving behind lesbian and trans women and their discrimination also in this region, which should be not the case, because if we are talking about full equality, it also concerns women with disabilities, older women, lesbian, transgender. So on that, we should do everything. The global gateway, which we discuss all during this meeting, should be the gender equality should be a cross-cutting priority for global gateway, where the gender and economic empowerment should in practice, not only in declarations, play a crucial role. So I call for that, and that it will be a horizontal approach, not only a sectoral approach when it's often a case. So from words we need to really go into the action, because I'm sure women and girls don't want to wait over 100 years for this equality. The equality should come now. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. Biedron. And now I give the floor to some of our honorable speakers. Who of you will take it? Yes, please.
Thank you. Thank you so much to the speaker from the European Parliament, if I remember correctly. On the question of working with men, I think this is absolutely essential for social norms change. And it is not going to take place, this social norm change, over a 5-year project. So I'm very happy when you said that there should be a continuation of the Spotlight initiative. But beyond that, I think our member states need to also take on the investment themselves. Because while we appreciate the support, and I think it should be continued beyond the 3-5-year program, I think our member states, and they are doing this, you heard the good examples being shared from Antigua, where it is not a zero-sum game, where when we talk about gender equality, we are saying men are left behind. It is really about how do we close the gaps so that both women and men and boys and girls live in an equitable and just world. And for that to happen and for gender equality to become a norm, it means we have to shift attitudes and shift norms through partnership and engagement on behavior change. And at a policy level, I even mentioned parental leave. There is not a single country in our Caribbean region, except, and I stand corrected, I would like to hear from Honorable Minister Griffin on this. I think Bahamas is the only country that has 3 days unpaid leave for paternity leave for all men, not for public sector workers alone, right? And I'm not speaking about companies, I'm saying as like across the board. I stand corrected, but I think it's only Bahamas. And Barbados just introduced very recently, I don't know if I don't think it has gone into effect as of yet, but it has, last year it was announced. So apart from those 2 countries, none of the other countries have introduced paternity leave. And actually we should transition not only from maternity and paternity leave, we need to go to parental leave as well. Where this relates to the social norms change, because the message it sends is that caring is not only the domain of women, and that men have a right to as well, to be able to be with their children from the time they're born, and to be able to provide them the opportunity to bond, and also to help their partner recover from a very difficult process. Any of you that have had children will understand that. But I give that as an example. So I think at many levels, there needs to be that partnership, and it needs to be reflected in policy. So I'll end there and hand over to Senator to see if she has any words to add. Thank you.
Thank you, my sister. I'm encouraged and excited by your intervention, Honorable Member, because you know what I'm going to challenge you to do is to make the change yourself. You have to go in and speak with the young people. I've challenged many, all of the male senators who are here present will tell you, I have been asking them to develop a mentoring program for boys for the longest while, because it is important that they see, I talked about it in my presentation, representation, they see men talking about issues relative to gender. They see men treating their female partners as equal. You have to cultivate that change. I've given up on the older generation. I really have. And so that is why our mandate through the Gender Caucus Committee at our Parliament has focused on young people. Because we're set in our ways. And I don't know that the generation now has no patience. 60 years is even too long for them. They can't, everything is instant. And so I focus on them. And I'm encouraging you to go into the schools, bring the schools into your parliament, right? Find mechanism, ways to reach out and connect with them and teach them that this is why we need to make the change. This is why it's not acceptable to catcall. This is why it's, you know, those little things make a difference. And of course, in partnership with all the big things, the spotlight initiatives and all of those. But for me, political will is very important, and the education to change the societal norms that we have come to accept. And let me tell you, I am one of those that was guilty. When our Honorable Executive Director of Gender Affairs, he's here, Jamie Saunders, is a male. Director of Gender Affairs was a male. And when they appointed him, I was livid. I couldn't understand, how do you put a man to deal with gender? In fact, we hired a consultant for our Young Women in Leadership program, and I removed myself from the selection committee. The selection committee selected a man. I was outraged. And then I calmed myself and I said, you have to practice what you preach. Gender is both ways. It can't just be about empowering women, but the men have a role to play. And so those little things make a difference. But for me, I have targeted the youth to really make that change in how we accept society to be constructed. And that is going to make the difference for the next generation. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now we will go to the next speaker, Mrs. Paula Lee from Antigua. Also wants to make a contribution. So, the floor is yours.
Your Excellencies, good evening, everyone. I'm the Executive Director of the Lifelong Learning Unit at the University of the West Indies Five Islands campus. And so I'm tasked with encouraging individuals to embrace lifelong learning. That includes persons with disabilities, females, males from the general population, and incarcerated individuals. And so what I have noticed is that most of the participants of these programs are particularly keen on registering for administrative courses as opposed to embracing the jobs of the future, the emerging economies. And I was wondering if it's possible that I might motivate your organizations to offer scholarships so that underserved males and females can participate more in these programs. In 2021, the Lifelong Learning Unit was established. In 2022, 132 persons graduated from the program. In 2023, 252. And recently, in 2025, 366 persons. Where were they all along? Why were they not studying? It's because access was not granted to them easily. There were programs being offered, but there were prerequisites. And so these individuals who were not confident to participate in this learning revolution, they felt that it was not necessary. I'm too old. I can't do this. I'm not intelligent enough. But as a result of the pathway that has been created through the Lifelong Learning Unit, all these individuals have decided to take the plunge. I shall end by speaking about our Seeds of Hope program, which offers a second chance to incarcerated individuals. Upon leaving prison, there are instances when their family members are not excited to be aligned with them because the stigma that is attached to someone that was incarcerated, it's unattractive to some family members. And so very often, there's recidivism. They return to prison, this revolving door. And as a result of the Seeds of Hope program, we have seen individuals exiting the prison and becoming entrepreneurs and participating in the local economy. I do believe that I must agree with Mrs. Alincia Grant. So often I've heard of the UN Charter, the policies, the plans of the UN. And I must say that in some instances, I've seen results. But I do believe that with a more concerted effort, greater achievements can be achieved. And so I want to posit today, I want to place on the table today that we would like to partner with the UN and all your various bodies so that we can continue to offer access to education to underserved females, underserved males, and incarcerated persons who are all a part of our economy and deserve to be considered in all the plans and actions that may follow from these conversations that we're engaged therein. I thank you very much for the courtesy of your time, and I yield to you.
Thank you. Is there somebody who wants to reply or answer to this? Not to this. Okay, but we received a message, a strong message. Thank you. Then we take the next, and the floor goes to Madam Mrs. You can introduce yourself because I don't see your name from here.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair. All protocols having been established, I am Alexandrina Wong, current Executive Director for the NGO Women Against Rape. My question is, and if it's appropriate, I would like to direct this question to Ms. Kiz Nathaniel. Looking at the data that was presented by the Honorable Alincia Williams about the number of women in Parliament, the number of elected women. My question is, has anyone considered using quota as a way to increase the number of women in the parliamentary system? Not women who are selected, but women who would participate in the general elections. Thank you very much.
That is such an excellent question, Ms. Wong. And the President of the Senate and I, we have just worked on our Antigua and Barbuda chapter. And these are discussions that we would have all the time. We think the time has come that there should be quotas. Look, we're not moving to a general election. We're not going to have any type of representational politics unless there is maybe a 40% in the first place. And if I may add, this is why I also stepped up for representational politics, because I was an independent senator before. And when I looked at the gaps and when I noticed that, look, we only have one female in the House of Representatives, one female versus 16 males, right, on the government ticket. And I thought to myself, I think that is time that I need to step up to be a part of that quota. So listen out for us, Ms. Wong. And yes, Madam President, I'm revealing all little secrets. I feel as though Ms. Wong, is somewhat tracking us. But these are the things that we're going to be working on and tabling as we launch off our gender caucus. Thank you so much for your question, Ms. Wong. Appreciate it.
If I may add as well, Madam Chair, if I may be allowed to. Madam Chair, may I be allowed? Yes. Madam Wong, the Gender Caucus Committee actually has, as part of its mandate, to encourage the respective political parties to ensure that there's gender balance in the slate. We haven't advanced that as yet. That is why Senator Johnson is saying that we have that coming, because our committee needs to activate those issues. Our numbers are small, and so moving that along that trajectory is a little slow in coming, but it is a concern, and it's something that we've explored. Again, the political will has to be there, and if it is that it's there, it's easier to get done. I know that there are other jurisdictions in the region, Ghana in particular, that has a quota system, and that seems to have fared off very well for them in terms of female representation. And we expect that that will also come into a positive light if we were to introduce it in Antigua. The pushback has been, of course, whether we're going to get quality as opposed to just getting quantity. And I ask the question all the time, when you choose and select whoever is going forward in your political party, in the system that you have now, do we always get quality?
Thank you. Is there anyone else? Yes.
Well, just on the debate that we were just having, I can only encourage all the delegates here to move into a system like that. I myself come from a political party that has had a women's statute for 40 years now, meaning that our ambition is that at least 50% of power of all elected offices are held by women. So in my party, when we make lists for the elections, the first spot is always reserved, and then number 3 and 5 and 7 and so on is reserved for women, and the others are open, meaning that both men and women can compete on these other spots. And that means that at least 50% of the members of parliament elected from my party, or all representatives are held by women. And I think what that leads to, and the senator has just spoken about quality, is that precisely, you get qualified candidates both of male and female gender, but it also changes the culture. Because the reason that often, if you don't pay particular attention to it, why women are underrepresented, even if they have the full right to run for office and be elected, is that politics doesn't naturally accommodate them. Women still take care of way more of the care work, of the family work, and that means that juggling, the care work and their political engagement can be a challenge. So introducing these kind of rules can help make politics more accommodating also for female candidates. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
For your contribution.
We have still 2 speakers, and we are getting out of time, but I think that we will have time for 2. Yes. So, next one is Member of Parliament Fernando Lopez Aguilar.
Yes, very shortly, just to confirm that every time we discuss women's rights in women's forums, yes, you hear that it'll take ages to remove all barriers of discrimination. Still standing. But the only point I wanted to make to confirm what has been said by some of my colleagues by now is that all political parties are compelled not only to present equal share of women and men, at times it's also the so-called crémaillère list, meaning woman, man, woman, man, woman, man, woman, man. So equally represented in all of institutions, also in the private life. So yes, it'll take ages to remove all barriers of discrimination, but yes, progressive legislation, equality legislation, parity legislation, gender-balanced legislation, protecting women by means of laws, that can also make a difference and make it shorter.
Yes, the answer is, at least from my side, I agree. Then there was also a question. Please.
Good afternoon, and respecting all the protocols previously being established, I just want to echo the point of women with disabilities and especially females. So I can speak personally of a child. Her name is Dahana, and for the first 5 years of her life, every time she needed to use the restroom because there was no accessible restroom, her mom had to go to the school to take her to the bathroom. And only when the speaker said, what happens to her mom when she gets to 60? Because she hasn't been able to work. And we face a challenge now that she's going to go to secondary school in September. And on Island, we do not have a completely accessible secondary school. And her goal is to go to the Antigua Girls High School. And I said to her, you can't go. And it's not because she's not bright enough, it's because that school doesn't have an accessible bathroom and it doesn't have the facilities in place for her to have a quote-unquote regular life. And when we talk about accessibility and women with disabilities, we need to move away from just the bathroom, because I had to say to someone, yeah, she can go to Antigua Girls High School and someone can physically take her out of her wheelchair and take her up the stairs. But is that fair? And for 5 years of her life, what does that do to her dignity? And then when menstruation hits, what happens on a day that maybe she touches somebody because there's blood on her uniform? When we talk about women's rights, I want women with disabilities to be right at the forefront, because we face challenges bigger than any other women. We are a very big population, and we can't have children. And in Antigua and Barbuda, there is currently a case. He gets 2 years for raping a young lady has a learning disability, and we now have a court matter with a man who had sexual intercourse with a female with learning disabilities. When we talk about gender-based violence and women, I want us to remember that they're women with disabilities. We deserve the right for love. Valentine's just passed. There's some of us who would like to get a flower and someone to cherish us. However, society doesn't put that forefront that we can become adults, and these conversations can never be straight line, because they are those who need to be protected forever but there are those who can live freely and independently. And I just want to ensure that we remember not just the child with a disability. And you literally have me here thinking, Diana's mom's going to need a job, because when she gets 60, what'll happen? Because if when she goes to St. Mary's and she needs to give her support day and she can never have an income, that means her mom can never get sick, because she can't ever go to medical benefits. If her mom gets pregnant with another child, her mom doesn't qualify for Social Security. And now the conversation about disability is even bigger than just a bathroom in September.
Thank you. Thank you so much for your contribution. And so with that, together with my co-chair, Ms. Henriksen, we would like to bring this meeting to a close. So again, thank you to our many guest speakers for your interesting and inspiring presentations. We would also like to thank all the members and participants for their excellent questions and remarks. The discussions clearly showed the importance of this subject. And so our takeaways from this afternoon will be reflected in the recommendation that we will adopt on Wednesday during the closing session of this first Caribbean EU Parliamentary Assembly. So finally, we also would like to thank you, say thank you to the OACPS and the EU and EC staff and the interpreters for their work and their support. Also, we would like to inform every single person in the room today that the government of Antigua and Barbuda invites the participants of this forum to a reception at Hodges Bay Resort at 7 p.m. So it's 6:28. We can all go straight to the reception and enjoy a casual time on the government of Antigua and Barbuda. And so this brings our session for the Women's Forum to an end. We now close this meeting. Thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you, everyone, and let us do more to promote women's rights all over the world.